everybody. Sean O'Connell Show coming at you, sending you into your first full weekend of summer. The summer started last weekend, so this is your first full weekend that is all summer. Hopefully you have big plans. I might be doing something extreme this weekend, James. I don't know if I should even bring it to the air because I don't want to jinx it, but it's a possibility. Maybe one of the wildest and hopefully coolest things that could ever happen in my life.
So, nice little weekend plan for you.
Yeah, Bed Bath & Beyond, you know?
R.I.P. Bed Bath & Beyond, by the way.
Does it not exist anymore?
Yeah, there's a great YouTube video, probably TikTok too, a Jeffrey Bezos song, and it says he killed Bed Bath & Beyond.
Is there still like an online store of Bed Bath & Beyond?
Possibly, but certainly no.
You tell me that there's no
mortars.
warm vanilla sugar hand lotion? I can't get behind that.
You can maybe go to what's the candle place? Bath and Body Works.
Oh,
if
yeah.
that's still.
I always got those two mixed up.
Yeah, I know, because they got bath in there.
Yeah.
Bath. Well, it's the you got an alliteration.
Both of them are alliterative.
Yeah.
Bed Bath & Beyond, Bath and Body Works. It's just too many B's, too much bath. Man, Bed Bath & Beyond had some wild stuff back in the day.
They did.
They had the hand soap that had granules in it.
They also were obviously didn't help them for too long, but they were prominently featured in Click, the Adam Sandler movie.
By the way, completely underrated movie.
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie, and it's actually very heartfelt. It's an emotional movie.
See, I never even got close to crying watching the movie. But
wait.
But my older brother.
Just wait, James.
My oldest brother, like, this is when he's in high school when this movie comes out. And I'd already seen it a couple times. He comes up to me, he's like, "You seen Click?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's good." I cried.
Yeah.
I'm like, "You cried."
It's an emotional movie.
It
James.
is definitely emotional, man.
It's a very emotional movie.
I don't know about crying in an Adam Sandler movie.
Just
I don't know.
one more example of Adam Sandler being maybe the greatest living genius in the United States, at least, because what does he do every time he's in a movie? He casts himself, this guy who wears sweatpants and basketball shorts and nothing else. He casts himself to be the lead, and then he finds the most beautiful and charming woman to be his romantic interest in the film. And that one is Kate Beckinsale.
Kate Beckinsale, man. She might be the one of the Adam Sandler movies.
Okay.
That's quite the pull by him.
All right. Well,
also,
done,
he is. I don't remember her name. Forgive me, but his wife is also a model / actress. So
she's in a bunch of his more recent movies, and he puts his daughters in his movies.
He seems to make her the girlfriend he broke up with before he meets the hot girlfriend later.
Probably some running gag in their relationship. He does cast her to be like the battle axe, kind of like the.
So it's not complete. I bring that up to say it's not completely inaccurate that he can pull these very beautiful women to be his romantic partners because he was able to convince her to marry him.
We know this. If you're a funny man, you've got a chance with anything, and if you're a funny, wealthy man, I mean, come on,
you're funnier and you're more attractive.
He's one of the funniest guys out there. Anyway, this is not an Adam Sandler tribute show today.
Or Bed Bath & Beyond.
Or a Bed Bath & Beyond tribute show today. We are 92 days until Utah football kicks off in what we now know will be a night game against UCLA on Fox, 9 p.m. I like it. Hope you do too. We are Star Lotulele days away. When you talk about how many days we are away, 92 is one of those, he's one of the great players in the history of Utah football. He wore number 92. Star Lotulele days away. Currently, the number 92 on Utah's roster is John Frank Jr., who I'm 99% sure is a walk-on.
Oh, JFJ.
JFJ. His father, John Frank, was a very prominent player for the Utes back in the late 90s and had his cup of coffee in the NFL, did like the Arena Football League thing. And John Frank actually was still, because I think he was done in 99 maybe, he was still lifting at the facility when we were up there, when I was up there in college. And he would just be this gigantic, you could tell he was in his, 30s at that point, but he was just this tank of a man. John Frank, one of the sack leaders. I think he was like number 3 career sacks or something like that. Anyway, maybe that was single-season sacks. But in any case, in the record books, and John Frank Jr.
Nate Orchard just called. He said, is anything close to 18.5? Oh, well, then why are we talking about it?
You know what? Now I got to look
Shout out to Nate Orchard.
Now I got to look up.
The mayor of Sac Lake City. He didn't actually call.
Oh, really? You had me fooled, James. You really had me
just
fooled.
For the listeners who are like, oh, my gosh, Nate Orchard, usually nice guy, going to be throwing shade at another Utes legend? What's going on?
We're going to talk a lot about hockey today. I'm very excited about this. It's an important day in hockey. We're going to start the show with at least a hockey-related topic here. At noon, Nick Olczyk, Utah Mammoth analyst. He's also he was on the Eastern Conference call for Sports USA. Tony Jones is going to join us at 12:30. Scott Mitchell here in studio with us at some point. Brian Fonseca, who covers Rutgers for NewJersey.com. We'll talk Dylan Harper. We'll talk Ace Bailey as the Utah Jazz gear up for a number 5 overall pick in the upcoming NBA draft. And, of course, when you're talking about Dylan Harper, you're probably talking about moving up. When you're talking about Ace Bailey, you're also probably talking about moving up, although that is less of a certainty. So we'll get to all those things on the show. Of course, at 1:30, we will send you into the weekend unburdened of your grievances. You can air them here, 877-353-0700. You can tweet at me at RealOC Sports and get it off your chest as you head into a warm, wonderful weekend in beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah, in the airing of grievances at 1:30. Show today and every single day is brought to you by our friends at Les Schwab Tires. Multiple locations up and down the Wasatch Front. Tires, wheels, accessories, for anything that you're driving, anything that you're towing, Les Schwab has it. Stop by your local Les Schwab. The pros there are going to get the job done right the first time. Make sure you tell them that OC sent you. They will hook you up. All right. I put a poll question out, James Peterson, and you and I were having a conversation about what sparked this poll question before the show started. We're going to flesh this thing out. The poll question is, do you ever find it acceptable as a sports fan for a coach to point a finger at players after a loss? Even to really give a strong reference to the limitations exhibited by a player after a loss. It's sort of a cultural taboo. And obviously, depending on the level, your Little League coach should never do this. Your
Little League coach should always do this.
Your high school coach is probably not supposed to do this. Your college
T-ball coach should absolutely do this. You see those?
What's wrong with you?
You see those T-ball videos where they run the wrong direction you've probably experienced.
My oldest daughter is playing T-ball right now, and it is glorious. It's so hilarious.
Has she had a meltdown, temper tantrum in the middle of first and second yet?
No, thank goodness. They were playing against a team, and there's like coaches everywhere on the field. It's just parents that are being like, hey, don't swing the bat and hit your friend. You know
Some
what I mean?
of them picking up the kids and walking to the next base.
There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of guidance going on. It's great.
Yeah.
It's wholesome. It's amazing. The only funny thing that has happened, there was one of the dad coaches was setting up the tee, just the height for the tee based on how tall the kid is, if they're really short or really tall. And then he was like, all right, put your feet right here and try to swing. And it wasn't his kid, but the kid, the kid, as this dad was just trying to help out. Coach dad was trying to help out. This kid with the bat in his hand looks at him. He's like, I know how to do it. Did not want to be coached. Did not want to be told.
Not very coachable. See,
Not
need
coachable.
to have a post-game press conference with that coach.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years old. Got to throw that kid under the bus.
You know what? Derek's not very coachable. That's what happened out there today.
This James Peterson kid, he's a bad egg, and he's not coachable.
I've actually we'll get back to what you were talking about. We got off the rails, but I'm actually really excited about my boy that's coming in about a month, as I said yesterday, to start T-ball. To start T-ball in however many years.
Well, you got to wait 5 years.
I got to wait 5 years, but I'm actually excited for that. The wife's really excited for that because she's all about the crazy T-ball videos on TikTok right now. So we're gearing up for that. I know it's going to be a while, but 2030, June 2030, we're ready for T-ball.
James is just going to be really, really pumped about the birth of the child, and then
nothing else till T-ball.
Until T-ball. All right, that's fine. Is it ever okay for a coach to point a finger at players after loss, verbally, literally, whatever? Yes, if it's a player's fault, or no, always comes from the top. When you're talking about mistakes, when you talk about errors, it always comes from the top. Here's the sound. Here's the reason I am asking this question. This is Pete DeBoer, Dallas Stars hockey coach, after last night's elimination loss at the hands of the Edmonton Oilers.
Anytime you pull a goalie, there's the reasoning's always to try and spark your group. So that was the number one reason. We had talked endlessly in this series about trying to play with the lead. And obviously we were in a 2-0 hole right away. And you know what, I didn't take that lightly, and I didn't blame it all on Jake. But, the reality is if you go back to last year's playoffs, he's lost 6 to 7 games to Edmonton, and we gave up 2 shots on 2 goals in an elimination game. So, it was partly to spark our team and wake them up, and partly, knowing that, status quo had not been working, and that's a pretty big sample size.
So my favorite part of that sound, that's Pete DeBoer explaining why he pulled goaltender Jake Ottinger.
Dallas Stars head coach, of course.
Ottinger had been phenomenal up to this point in the playoffs. He had cooled off significantly and had his struggles against Edmonton. But, Edmonton does that to goalies. They've got the guy who's considered right now the best player in the game in Connor McDavid. They've got his running mate who might be just as good in Leon Draisaitl. They are a team full of scorers. They're an offensive team, right? So Pete DeBoer explaining why he pulled the goalie, he says, look, I didn't blame it all on Jake, and then he proceeded to blame it all on Jake. It's that Ricky Bobby, I said with all due respect, look, I'm not blaming it on Jake, but he's bad against Edmonton. He gave up 2 shots that turned into 2 goals. He said it that way. He should have said 2 goals on 2 shots. And the reality is sometimes it is a player's fault that these things happen. There is this code among coaches, and I don't know. I really don't know if this was all Jake Ottinger's fault. I really don't. I love watching hockey. I was watching some of this game. I don't have the experience and the analytical eye on hockey to be like, well, that's all on Ottinger.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't. I don't know the nuance of goaltending at the NHL level to be able to say, well, anybody worth a salt would have stopped that shot. I can't do that. Yeah. And we probably shouldn't do that with any professional athlete, but we take liberties when it's basketball or football or a game that we're a little bit more versed in. I certainly do that in fights all the time. Even though I lost plenty of fights, I'm like, well, I never would have gotten beat that way.
Yeah, well, I lost plenty of fights, but never like that.
But not like that. That's something you could never let happen. So, I'm not even judging that right now. Is it Ottinger's fault? Kind of irrelevant to my question. If it is his fault, are you okay with the coach sitting down after an elimination game? Your team is already out. They're off to their vacation. They thought they had a shot at winning a Stanley Cup this year, which is for all hockey guys, that is the life's dream, right? And for most, this is as tantalizingly close as they are ever going to get. And he goes in, sits in the presser, and he says, look, man, I was trying to spark the team. Didn't work. But just so you know, it was a good decision because this goalie stinks right now, or it stinks against Edmonton. And that, to me, was interesting to see because, look, it might be him just telling the truth, and it was an analytical answer. It wasn't him seeming to, be mad at Ottinger, but just, the situation we were in, he has not played well against Edmonton. By the way, here's the resume he's got against Edmonton. And the early goings in this game, Edmonton was 2 for 2. That is not supposed to happen ever. So he pulls the goalie. It doesn't work out. And like any other decision in sports, when it doesn't work out, the first thing that we do and the first thing that the media does and the first thing that fans do is you start to question whether or not that was the right decision. His justification was seemingly fact-based, but it is coloring a little bit outside the lines on the norm for what coaches do or say at a podium. Most of the time, the coach, even if it's totally disingenuous, 98% of the time, a coach will sit up there, I got to be better, I got to get the guys better prepared, this is on me. Whether they believe that or not, it's the code. It's what you say. And we know it's coach speak. We know that a lot of times, no, it actually is not your fault. It's the fault of the quarterback that threw 4 unexplainable interceptions, or it's the fault of the moron who got 6 bad penalties, or it's the point guard who kept turning the ball over or whatever. But coaches usually sit up there and they take the bullets because that's part of the job, even though all of us know there's this tacit agreement that all of us know, oh, okay. Like there's never a follow-up question, almost never a follow-up question when there's a loss and Kyle Whittingham says, frustrating, this stinks, it's terrible, I'm really bothered that this happened, it's all on me, I got to be better, my assistant coaches have to be better. I'm not sitting there raising my hand and saying, well, but what about this player who made this mistake? That's what you should blame it on. You can't change that, Kyle. He knows, we know, we all know, but there's this an agreement just like, okay, coach is doing what he's supposed to do, and he's wearing the armor of his multi-million-dollar contract, and he's saying, this one's on me. Let's leave the players out of it. Peter DeBoer doesn't have to do that as a professional. The hockey code is a little bit different than all other codes in professional sports and in all sports in general. But this one was interesting, and the reaction to it has been interesting if you pay attention to the hockey sphere. People are just like, whoa, man. Jake Ottinger was like, he was really, really good for you. He was a big reason why you guys got to this point. And not only did you pull him, but you kind of added insult to injury by reminding everyone how bad he's been against Edmonton. And again, Edmonton just does that to multiple teams. So was this crossing a line for you as a fan? Was this something that if it is Will Hardy saying it about Lowry Markkanen, are you going to be like, whoa, what are you doing, man? Because you do have to worry about team chemistry, relationships between coaches and star players. And Jake Ottinger has been one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, certainly in these playoffs, and for a good portion of the year. So have you now developed a level of concern for this relationship, et cetera, et cetera? Go vote on the poll at Real OC Sports, 877-353-0700. Let me know what you think about the sound that we just played. James, we were talking about this before the show, and it's just kind of him. He's being coldly analytical.
Yeah.
Which maybe works, maybe flies in the Dallas dressing room, but doesn't seem to with everybody who watched it happen.
Yeah, first of all, as a media member, I'm pro honesty from coaches and players. I'm not anti-coach speak. I'm agreeing with you that like you get what you get from coaches after media after games and in media availabilities. And yes, of course, if you feel the need to follow up and you feel like, no, I need to get a better answer from this coach for my article, for my radio show, for whatever, then sure, do that. But I'm also like, if it's clear the guy's not going to give you more than coach speak, that's fine. I'll take that. But so I'm not anti-coach speak, but I am pro honesty. So that might be why I actually really liked what Pete DeBoer did in just laying it out there. They asked him why he did it. He had plenty of time to get ready for that question. Obviously, it pulled him in the first period, right? He knew it was coming.
You know, he's sitting there. He's standing behind the bench all game long, being like, "Oh,
how am I going to answer this? How am I going to answer for this?"
They're going to ask me why he's. And look, maybe guys are chirping at him.
Yeah,
Coach, why we pull him?
And I think that I bring that up to say I think that he came off as very prepared to answer that question, and he answered the question, right? So I'm okay with it. I also think that his tone is probably why I'm okay with it. He just spit out some facts, right? Like you said, cold, analytical, wasn't emotional at all. He didn't make it personal about Jake Ottinger.
It is a little personal to say.
I mean, it's personal to say your job
lost
performance.
All these games against Edmonton. It's a little personal to do that, to bring up old you-know-what.
But he made it about his performance, right?
Correct.
He didn't make it about anything personal about who he is as a person, what's actually personal by definition.
There's nothing more personal than for a professional athlete than how you perform in these moments.
And bringing up old scars, it does come to mind what our coach, Gordy Chiesa, usually brings up. He likes to, without us, we don't even have to ask for him. He likes to tell us what great leaders do, what great coaches do. And one of the things he always says is you encourage, you don't bring up old mistakes. You encourage your players and give them critical feedback as to how to be better going forward. So it does bring that up. It does bring that to mind to say, hey, maybe that's a bit of a cardinal violation of a cardinal rule.
The thing is, if you pull that one sentence out of the answer, I'm probably in your boat. I'm probably defending
that's fair.
The whole thing, because especially when we're talking about professionals, okay? Especially when we're talking about professionals who work and live and eat, sleep, breathe a sport where, like, you can swallow your own teeth in a game and go back out on the ice. These are, like, some of the toughest individuals in the world. But goalies are a little bit like kickers, okay? If all other hockey players are dogs, goalies are cats, all right? You're not sure if they like you. You don't know if you should say certain things. You don't know if you should act a certain way. I don't know Jake Ottinger from Adam. Maybe he's just like, coach is right. But you know he wanted to stay in. You know he wanted to play. You know that he felt worse than anybody did about giving up 2 goals on 2 shots. And then to have the coach sit down and be like, by the way, just to remind all of you, not only was he bad tonight, he's been bad against Edmonton. He's lost 6 of 7 games against them. You'd just be like, whoa, coach. Why you got to bring up stuff from last year? That is,
and maybe if he says he hasn't been good enough this series, maybe if he leaves it at that, because that's right now, or he wasn't good because it's after the series is taking over, but he wasn't good enough this series, and that's part of why I went. He had a bad start. He had a bad start again today. We can't afford to keep doing what we're doing. So maybe it's better if he says that, but it probably also has a similar effect to Otter. It's just too bad. Brogan Houston, another one of our hockey guys here, Utah Mammoth beat writer for the Deseret News. You remember? I don't remember if it was on with you or when Scott Mitchell might have been filling in for you recently, but he was asked who the best goaltender in the playoffs is, and Connor Hellebuck was still in it with the Winnipeg Jets. Bobrovsky was obviously still in it, and he said Jake Ottinger.
Well, Ottinger
and he was through the first 2 rounds
in a couple of these games, and Bobrovsky has now set a bar, such a high bar for himself, that if he's not playing at that level, then people are going to be like, playoff Bob's a little bit off. Doesn't seem to be at this moment in the Stanley Cup playoffs as they head to the final. And look, Edmonton should be the story today, but this is what's interesting about media interaction with coaches and stuff like that. This now makes you wonder what the fallout's going to be, if there is any, in Dallas after Peter DeBoer, respected coach, sits down and is just like, and the right question was asked, but the answer is like, well, I was trying to spark the team. Okay, nothing wrong there.
See, that's enough. That's probably coaches like Kyle Whittingham, like you said, that's probably where they would have left it.
One way to spark the team. One way to spark the team is you make a change. All right, definition of insanity is you keep doing the same thing and you expect a different result. Okay, I was trying to spark the team.
Do something different.
Didn't work. That's an answer. That's
Yeah.
enough.
And then he expounded with,
And then
well,
he's
he
just
hasn't
like,
been very good lately against Edmonton.
He said, I'm not blaming it all on Jake, and then he blamed it all on Jake.
He really did. He really did.
With all due respect, Mr. Dennett, you can't just say whatever you say.
That ain't worth a velvet painting of you know what.
after you offer the qualifying statement. This is good advice for all of us, especially those of us in long-term relationships or married. When you say something that is non-threatening, that is non-committal, that is all like very neutral, and then you say, but, and you just go in and you just destroy whatever, like the reaction to that is going to be, excuse me?
Yeah.
That's an argument starter.
You better have established enough trust that you know I can give honest criticism with you. If you're going to do that, you better know that you have the rapport and the trust level to do that. Absolutely.
I'm not saying,
and you probably should steer clear of it altogether.
I'm not saying that it's your fault, but, and then it's your fault. Try that with your wife. See how it goes.
Yeah.
That's what Pete DeBoer just did.
Yeah.
And now the card or the ball is in Jake Ottinger's court to be like, that's fine. Yeah, he's right. I needed to be better.
So
also, how does the dressing room react to it? Like, we got a couple.
That's our guy in goal. He's been awesome.
1624 on the old text line says this should happen more. We're all thinking it. It's about time that the blame gets pointed at the right person. Most of the time, it is the player's fault, and they're not indestructible. And you're right. That is true. This is one of the things that drives me insane about how we talk about coaches and how, like, oh, well, I was very defensive of Andy Ludwig last year especially, right? And he ended up, leaving or being fired, whatever you think happened there.
Officially resignation.
And it was like, okay, like, yes, everyone could have been better in every situation, obviously, but whatever your job is, take away the thing, the number one tool you have in making your job easy or making your job good. Like, James, ask me to do this radio show every day without a laptop connected to the internet.
Yeah.
And the show's not going to be as good, okay? I could still do it. I know I could. I could still make it at least marginally listenable, but I'm not going to be as informed. I'm not going to be as up-to-date, right? Take away whatever your job is. Take away the number one tool you have at your disposal and see if you're good at your job. Oh, you're a roofer? No hammer. Find a way to get the nails in. You could figure it out. You go grab a rock, whatever. You can't have a hammer.
The butt end of your screwdriver, whatever.
Right?
Like, you could, yeah.
And we say, this coach, how dare he? We're firing this coach. We're getting rid of this coach. If you don't have a penalty in the Arizona State game that took away a touchdown, the whole scenario works out differently. Did the coach commit the penalty? Nope.
Did he not did he not prepare them to not make those penalties?
Was he like, hey, I know that you commit this penalty every single time we run this play in practice. We're still going to have you run the play. Nope. I promise that's not what happened. So 1624, you're absolutely 100% right. It is almost always, 99.9% of the time, it is almost always the fault of the player when an error happens. The players are the one actually playing. It's why coaches shouldn't get as much credit as they do. They shouldn't get as much blame as they do. But that's just the way things are.
That's the deal.
So, and they know that. It's not language in the contract most of the time, but it could be. Hey, anytime you lose a game, you go to that podium, you point the fingers back at yourself, you say, this was my fault. We know it wasn't. We know that you didn't actually miss the final shot. All right? We know that you didn't fumble the ball. We know that you were not the one who committed the penalty. But guess what? You're just going to say, that's my bad, and we're going to move on to next week. And Pete DeBoer decided not today. And I don't know if I'm not attacking him for it. I don't know if I'm even mad about it. It's just kind of a strange scenario after an elimination game and talking about a player who has been great up until this point.
Just as we head to break, just something to ponder. He signed a 4-year deal, Pete DeBoer, in 2022. So I believe that means that this coming season is the last year on his contract.
Yeah.
Just something to ponder there as you consider maybe the fallout from what Pete DeBoer did in postgame.
Good point from 2289 as well. Let's hope that Otter wants out of Dallas now. Anything that undermines Dallas could potentially be good for the Utah Mammoth.
Yeah, go east, young man.
Not a bad idea.
Or come to Utah.
Ottinger,
Although we love veggie.
Veggie's, yeah. You don't want to upset the apple cart. Veggie's hitting his stride.
Upset the carrot cart, maybe the broccoli cart for veggie.
Okay, I see what you did there. My question, we got to get Veggie on. I need to know, because he had one of the sickest paint jobs on his mask in the entire NHL. He had like the dinosaur, the velociraptors, right? Now that you're the Mammoth, are you going to switch that? Because it's a prehistoric life theme still. Are you going to go with dinosaurs? Or are you going to go with Pleistocene era mammoths, saber-toothed tiger, giant sloth, right? Paraceratheriums, things like that. I want to know.
Casually dropping Paraceratherium.
You know what that is?
I do not.
Largest land animal that ever lived. Look it up.
Oh, I will have to.
A giraffe rhinoceros monster. Humongous. Okay.
So, worst animal imaginable. That's all you had to say.
No, okay. I mean, they seem like they'd be awesome and probably delicious.
Well, scariest.
They were just huge. Anyway. Let me know what you think. At Real OC Sports, that's how you tweet at me, 877-353-0700. You could text us. The poll question is up. Is it ever okay for a coach to point a finger at players after a loss? Right now, 64% of the votes say no, it always comes from the top. In reality, it doesn't, but we have agreed as a culture, as a society, that coaches are just kind of supposed to sit there and take the lumps that might belong to players. Pete DeBoer, he doesn't like that. And maybe neither do I. Lots left to get to on the Sean O'Connell Show. Scott Mitchell's going to join us at some point in here in this first hour. Don't go anywhere. It's Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
Well, I was very much in favor of the seating change we made last week. The entire management committee was. It was the right thing for college football. It simplified things for sure, and I'm excited about it. And I think I speak on behalf of my commissioner colleagues, and it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and look,
I like 16. More access is better for the Big 12 for sure. But I'm also about fairness, and there's been a lot of conversations out there about AQs. And, you know, from where I sit, and I know I speak on behalf of our coaches and our ADs, we want to earn it on the field. And I'm adamant about that. And I think a 5+11 format does that. It's fair. It's what our fans want.
That's Brett Yormark talking about why he's in favor of college football playoff expansion. The 5+11 model that we talked about seems to be gaining traction. The SEC and the Big Ten ultimately get to make the decision, which is frustrating for everyone. But Brett Yormark and the ACC commissioners, I think Pete Bavacqua at Notre Dame, they seem to be in favor of this 5+11 model, and hopefully that's what we end up with in an expanded format. This year it's going to be what you've seen, and then I think the deadline is December 1st, 2025. The new model has to be presented to your broadcast partners, your television broadcast partners. The NCAA and these conferences, of course, have to go and say, this is how we want to do it. And ESPN, of course, will say, great, we got more playoff games, let's go. But 5+11 seems to be the way that we're headed. That sound courtesy of ESPN and SportsCenter. The Big 12 spring meetings are in Orlando this week. James just called my attention to an announcement. Chris Vanini tweeted this out. We know this. Big 12 and WWE have kind of a partnership. And apparently they're expanding that partnership by bringing Friday Night SmackDown cards to Big 12 football game sites the night before those games.
Like a little Friday Night SmackDown pep rally.
Yeah.
Before Big 12 football games. Now, listen, what's interesting about that, and I'm not, maybe it's a different wrestling federation or whatever. I'm not that deep into that world, so texters, if you feel the need to correct me, please do 877-353-0700. But the Delta Center, if I'm not mistaken, already is a pretty regular destination. Maybe not for Friday Night SmackDown, but for WWE events. So this wouldn't be that big of a change for our market. But can you imagine like Lubbock hosting Friday Night SmackDown on the night before a Red Raiders game, Texas Tech? Like that's, dude, they don't go to those markets.
I bet that
they probably would love it.
I bet they'll make more money in Lubbock. I bet they'll sell out like the county fair at a place like that. You get 100,000 West Texans.
Oh my gosh!
To
some
Friday
wrestling
Night SmackDown. So I mean, this is interesting. It's kind of cool. It's kind of fun, right? How do you integrate the Big 12 brand into the WWE and vice versa without it making it feel campy? And more importantly, how much money does it bring in? Because that's like wonderful, good. You're doing Friday Night SmackDown. You get what? You get a 2-for-1 ticket now, where you get to go to the game and you get to Friday Night SmackDown. I just don't know how this adds revenue, and that's all that unfortunately matters in college sports right now. The attention you're going to get, and trust me, this is something that I've been very closely observing for a long time, because the crossover, even as wrestling is very mainstream and MMA has become very mainstream and boxing has been mainstream for a long time, the crossover, the Venn diagram of fans that care a lot about college football and the NFL and care a lot about those other things is not as strong as you would think.
Especially in a lot of these college football markets are not big cities that have multiple sports teams close by, like we do in Salt Lake City. I mentioned Lubbock, for example.
The television interest is one thing, but I mean, look, I work for a league that tried to make MMA a sport like the NFL, right? Like, let's do it like a season. Let's do it like everyone else does. Let's make this a season. And the UFC famously years ago was like, we're going to make the fighters wear uniforms now instead of just having shorts with sponsors all over them like NASCAR. You got to wear a uniform because we got to be more like the NBA. We got to be more like the NFL. And fans in that world kind of just like, what are you doing? Don't try to turn our thing into that thing. Our Friday night SmackDown fans going to be like, why is Kyle Whittingham here? Now, Coach Witt going and like tackling some WWE wrestler and, doing a little Pat McAfee situation would be the sickest thing we've ever seen, but it's not going to happen. Can you imagine SmackDown in Provo before a big BYU game?
Yeah.
And like they bring out the latest Nakua brother and they're just like, all right, here he is. Is that Friday night SmackDown crowd going to be like, yes, I know who that is and I care? I'm skeptical on these things.
Yeah.
Deion Sanders has crossover appeal. You can take Coach Prime into any SmackDown whatever, and the fans are going to be like, oh, sweet, it's Prime. Beyond that, Lance Leipold shows up at a SmackDown event. Who cares? Name for me, James, because SmackDown is usually a different product than WrestleMania. That's where the big stars are out. Name for me one WWE wrestler that you're excited to see do the coin toss at a Utah game.
The Miz is still a wrestler.
I think he's in the other one.
That might be the only one that I can name of that's currently a wrestler that I'm certain is currently a WWE wrestler that a lot of people like. So I'm not the right guy to ask, I guess. But maybe that guy, The Miz.
The Miz. Okay, so The Miz comes and does the coin toss, and what? We get like more NIL money? I don't know. So it's interesting. It's cool. Hopefully there's some crossover programming. I would love to have a WWE wrestler come in on a Friday show and start quizzing them about Utah football. Just that's gimmicky. That's fun. Does it actually do anything for the Big 12 Conference? I guess we'll find out. All right, we'll take a quick one here. Scott Mitchell's joining me in studio next on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Scott Mitchell joining us here in studio on the Sean O'Connell Show for the Hot Lunch. If you can't hear us live, make sure you download the ESPN 700 app. Tell your smart speaker to play ESPN 700, ESPN700sports.com. We got an on-demand section. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts. Nick Olchik's going to join us in about, we'll make it 13 minutes. But like I said, we got Scott Mitchell here now. Scott, I'm going to start with a hockey question, actually. So we just played some sound. Pete DeBoer, the head coach of the Dallas Stars, he was asked after the game why he pulled his goalie, Jake Ottinger, and in the first period, after he gave up 2 goals, and he kind of, he said, well, gave up 2 goals on 2 shots, and then he proceeded to, he said, I don't blame it all on Otter, but, and then he kind of blamed it all on him. And so I asked the question today. The poll question is out, 877-353-0700 if you want to weigh in. How do you feel about coaches when they're just kind of honest? Because he didn't say anything excessively personal. He just gave the facts on how poor the performance has been for Ottinger against Edmonton. So I didn't blame it on him, and then he said, but he kind of isn't good, and he wasn't good tonight. How do you feel about this? When coaches go to the media, whatever, and they say, well, Scott Mitchell threw 4 picks. That's why we lost the game.
Oh, boy. We need an hour for this conversation. But I will just tell you, typically when a coach is in that situation, it's called CYA, right?
Sure.
It's like it's not going to be me. Like, I coach them great. Like, I'm an amazing coach. And if they're not playing good, it's because they're not that good, or whatever reason. But it's not because of me. Either way, it's just not a good situation. It's not a healthy situation. I'm a big believer of like the coaches talk about, hey, we don't spill out into the media what's a personal internal situation, and when you're a player and you see your coach like defying that kind of written rule about things, then you go, well, that's someone I'll never trust. And not only will I ever trust him, it makes me kind of leery of, it's not a guy that you want to, get in the foxhole with. It's not a guy that you're going to go to the end of the earth for, because that guy doesn't have your back. I mean, if you're a coach, what if you really want to get the best out of your players, stand up for them and be there for them, as opposed to throwing them under the bus.
Well, I found it interesting because, again, he doesn't there's no personal attack there, but he does remind everyone. Well, he's lost 6 or 7 games against Edmonton, and so so you're like, whoa. I mean, most of the time, and Kyle Whittingham's great at this. Yeah. There's plenty of times where we watch, and we see a player or a couple of players or however many players screw it up, right? They drop the game-winning pass. Yep. They commit the penalty that cancels out the touchdown. The player makes the mistake, and what happens? The coach sits down, the media asks him questions, and he says, that's on me. And then we all just kind of move on, even though we know it's not true.
Right.
But it's the code that you're talking about. It's an unwritten, kind of written rule that, like, well, you're just going to point the finger at yourself, even if we all know that you're not out there playing and actually didn't affect the outcome.
Well, here's the thing. Like, you don't need to be reminded in the media of, like, if you're not playing well, you're going to get pulled. Like, that. Like, you understand the pressure of what you're under. And not only you, but these coaches and everyone, like, it's a hard business to be in sports, in that you have to win. You have to win to keep your job, to have success, to have relevance. And if you don't, then you are going to get pulled. You are going to not be around any longer. But to be reminded of that, and coaches in their subtle ways they'll certainly remind you in a meeting. And I guarantee you, Coach Whittingham has the attention of all his players. They understand what's expected of them, and they understand that, they need to do their job or else. But he just understands where that communication has to happen and when. And there are some coaches that believe that maybe they can send certain messages through the media to get to the team, so the team kind of understands things, and stuff like that goes on. And the same with players. There are times the players will share things with the media. Maybe they're frustrated with their contract or certain things, the Denver Nuggets fired their coach with 3 games left in the season, and that just seemed really odd to me. And you just have to wonder what kind of communication was happening with the players, because a lot of things really didn't come out publicly. And I thought it was interesting when Jokic came out and said, sometimes these things happen and they change. And then you see how the Nuggets responded after the coach was fired. But there wasn't a lot, but some of the things that were said, like Jokic didn't just go, man, I'm just so mad. I'm upset that the coach has been fired. It's going to just really throw our season off. It was almost like, yeah, I'm kind of glad it happened. And so sometimes you use the media or you share things in the media to send a message or to make a point.
How much did you care about kickoff time when you were a player?
Oh, boy. Well, here's the thing. So kickoff time to me was, I wanted all the primetime games I could get, because all that meant is you were good. And so when I was in Cincinnati, and we had 1 o'clock kickoffs, and Cincinnati's a centrally located, so all of the away games were almost glorified home games because you had an early kickoff time and you'd be home early. So from that standpoint, that was really good, but all that meant is we sucked.
Yeah.
And that wasn't good. So like I like Monday Night Football. When I played in the NFL, there was nothing better than Monday Night Football. Nothing better than Monday Night Football. So because you knew that you were like the game. You knew everybody was watching you. There was a different attitude. There was a different intensity to it. There was a different it was just, I remember my rookie year driving to the stadium, and it was nighttime because, the game was at night, and there was the blimp. And the blimp, we got the blimp. Like, if you have the blimp, that is amazing. Like, this is, and just seeing the blimp got me just fired up for the game. So I loved those things. But I hate that college football no longer exists on a Saturday afternoon. It just feels like, I know there's a few games that are that way. I think Utah this year has, no, it's 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock is the ESPN Plus game now.
Yeah. So I don't like that. I don't. Now, being a broadcaster, I hate that 9 o'clock Utah time Utah's playing USC or UCLA, but I don't care. Like, as a player, if you're asking as a player, it's like, man, I wanted all those primetime games.
I like the late game cap off opening weekend. We're just gonna, kids are in bed, you sit down, Pac-12 after dark, see how that thing plays out. Big 12 meetings happening this week. Brett Yormark has expressed that the Big 12 is in favor of the expanded college football playoff model. That is 5 conference champions get automatic bids and then 11 at-large bids. Big 10 has proposed 4 automatic bids for Big 10, 4 for the SEC, 2 for ACC, 2 for Big 12. And, eventually the big boys are going to get what they want, but the Scott Mitchell vote goes to which format?
Well, I don't like the automatic bids automatically just because you're this conference, because every year the teams, like your best teams are typically going to be your best teams, and those are the best teams in the country in the SEC and the Big Ten. I mean, it just that over time has vetted itself out. But it's the rest of the conference, and the rest of the conference, I mean, really, in my opinion, the SEC and the Big Ten are saying our conference from top to bottom is just better than your conference. Like our average teams are better than your best teams. Yeah. That's what they're really saying, and I don't agree with that. I really don't. And quite frankly, I think how college football changed with the portal, with NIL, is the Alabamas and the Georgias are no longer holding like all of the best players in the entire country on their third string depth chart. Like, these players, the talent is being spread across the country. Otherwise, I think the SEC would not want this. Like, they're like, we need Alabama to be in the playoffs even if they have 3 losses. Like, we want to guarantee that, we're just going to have the most teams in the whole thing. So I don't like it, and I don't like it because they can game the system through the rankings. Like, you look at Ole Miss was not a great team last year, and they basically went through the season unscathed, and they didn't play anyone, and they were ranked, and so they were able to stay ranked all the way to the end of the season. But they weren't a great team. Indiana wasn't a great team, and it was the same thing in the Big Ten. So I don't like the rankings, and I don't like that they could totally game the rankings to make sure they got all their teams in there. And I don't think all of the great teams in college football reside in those two conferences.
I think that the end result doesn't change a lot if it's 5 conference champs and then it's 11 bids that are all at-large bids. Those are mostly going to be Big Ten and SEC teams. But what it does allow is in a year where, maybe the Big 12 has Utah, BYU, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State are all really good. It allows for, hey, all of them got in.
Right.
If you do the automatic bids, or even if you get 3 teams instead of 2, that's huge. That's a big financial bonus. It's a big perception bonus. That's a big recruiting bonus, whatever, for the Big 12 conference. And setting a limitation, because if you say you get 2 automatic bids, never are they going to be like, well, also you get an extra one just for fun.
Right.
This is not going to happen.
No.
So I think the 5 plus 11, since a silly thing to call it, that's what we're going to go with. That's what Brett Yormark wants. And even though I don't always agree with him, I'll stick with him on this one.
Yeah, and I'll tell you where, and I agree with what you're saying. I totally get it. And you want whatever is going to give you the most exposure in the college football playoffs. But if the Big 12 really wants to become more relevant, I think they need to go out and go pick up a couple of schools in the ACC. I think some of those top schools, like, see if you could go after a Clemson and a Florida State and maybe a Miami and maybe some of those schools, bring them into the Big 12. And then you really have a much greater position to negotiate, and you have power where you really don't have all that power in your conference right now.
We're 92 days away from Utah football kicking off. Did you play with a great player who wore number 92?
Well, I didn't. No, not really. I can't think of one, but I can think of Reggie White, and he was 92. So I played against Reggie White more than I cared to. Like Reggie was a heck of a player and a heck of a human being, and of course one of the greatest of all time. But when you say 92, that's really what comes to mind to me.
That's a pretty good one. That probably comes to a lot of people's mind when you mention number 92.
I don't have nightmares. He's one I don't have nightmares over. But yeah, he was pretty darn good.
The Miami Dolphins player who wore number 92 and considered to have worn it best, John Denny. Hey, shout out.
John Denny.
All right, John Denny.
Hey, there you go.
Haloti wore number 92 for the Detroit Lions, although he was not the same Haloti that played in Baltimore at that point necessarily. But Scott, I could do a whole dang show with you, man. Thanks for stepping in.
Whenever you want to, let's do it.
All right. That's Scott Mitchell, Utah football legend, color analyst on your Utah football radio broadcast, and, of course, host of the Down and Dirty right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. All right, Nick Olczyk, he's going to join us next. Utah Mammoth color analyst, also Sports USA analyst on the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll talk some hockey with Nick Olczyk in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show continues here on a Friday. Time to talk a little hockey now. Nick Olczyk, kind enough to join us, give us a few minutes. You're familiar with Nick from your Utah Mammoth broadcasts. Well, I guess they were Utah Hockey Club broadcasts, but now they're Utah Mammoth broadcasts. Also, he's been calling some Stanley Cup playoffs for Sports USA. Joins us here on your home of the Utes. Nick, welcome. How are you?
John, great to be with you. A very exciting time for hockey fans, for Utah Mammoth fans, and the playoffs really are the best time of the season. And I don't think it's going to be too long before our very own Mammoth are going to be hopefully competing at this time of the year. So hopefully all the great hockey fans out there have had a chance to watch the drama and the intensity that the Stanley Cup playoffs always seems to bring.
It's been a great playoff so far. Let's talk about that thing that you just said, though. Let's talk about how far away the Utah Mammoth are. We've seen, if anybody had a chance to tune in to some of the World Championship hockey, obviously 4 guys from this Mammoth roster played roles there. Keller was your captain. Cooley assisted on the gold medal winning goal. I mean, prominent roles. And, I think that's as promising from the international side, but also everyone we've talked to said, yeah, like performing at that level and gelling even, in summertime hockey, that's promising for what this team can do in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So your thoughts on how far away we are until they're actually there?
Yeah, the expectations going into last season, Sean, were very clearly laid out for this team, formerly known as the Utah Hockey Club. And those expectations and standards were to be playing competitive games and meaningful games towards the end of the season. And the reality is that you can check that box for what they did. It took until 4 games left in the season for them to be officially eliminated from playoff contention. So, I think the push that they made towards the end, how this group continued to gel, but I think most importantly is the maturation process and the development of some of these young guys and some of the older guys that have played in the league for a while, but maybe haven't had experience playing at the most important time of the year. That goes a long way because and you learn very quickly what it takes, the plays you need to make, as opposed to sometimes the plays that you want to make. And you mentioned the experience that the guys like Cooley, like Kesselring, like Clayton Keller were able to get at the World Championships, given the United States their first World Championship in 92 years. Those experiences also play a role, too, because there's one thing to play. And look, the National Hockey League is the greatest league in the world. Whether it's regular season, playoffs, Stanley Cup final, doesn't matter. There is no other league that can hold a candle to what the NHL has in terms of talent, in terms of staff and people around the game. But when you play in those high-pressured moments where there's a Stanley Cup on the line, a World Championship on the line, a gold medal on the line, which is what we're going to see next winter with the Olympics over in Italy, these are the games where you learn about yourself. Can you make a play? Can you score a goal? Can you do what you have to do when the lights are brightest? And I think for those guys who are part of Team USA, those are great moments for them individually, but also great moments for Team USA. And each one of those guys has represented this great country at other levels when they were younger. And hopefully a tournament like that can also give them an upper hand for hopefully making the United States Olympic hockey team next fall. But a great experience for them. And to your original question, those experiences will help the Mammoth because these guys are going to help, having learned to know what it takes to win at the high-pressure moments. So I think to continue to grow as a team, as the individual players continue to grow too, I think that this team is definitely primed for a push to be right there for a playoff spot again next season.
We talked a little bit yesterday about the additions of a couple of KHL prospects, guys that have been in the pipeline for a couple of years now. Dmitry Simashev and Daniil But were given their contracts to play NHL hockey with the Mammoth. What do you know about those guys?
Well, I know that if you combine their height, they're about almost 13 feet, which is nearly the size, I should say, the height of an actual mammoth. So we got a couple of big boys that are going to be part of this team for a long, long time to come. And it's not just the size, John. It's not just the fact that they're big and that trying to get around them is just trying to get around a redwood tree. They can move. And you don't really come across that combination of players or people that have size and can really be mobile enough to be effective and impactful. And Dmitry Simashev, in terms of his skill and ability, smooth skating, a 6'5" defenseman who's got some grind to his game. I don't think he's going to shy away from the physicality and the rough stuff. But just his size, not just in terms of the physicality, but how much reach he has and how much space he can cover. He usually only needs to take a couple of strides to get to an area where a guy that's even 6'2" will need to take a couple of more. So I just think the distance that he's able to cover, the intelligence that he has in terms of reading the play, and it's going to be a difference coming over and playing in the National Hockey League. So there's going to be that adjustment period, and hopefully he'll be able to hit the ground running from camp in September. But he is going to be a pillar on the blue line for a long time to come. And I think also having a guy like Mikhail Sergachev here established as this team's number one defenseman is only going to help from the language barrier aspect, but also being a fellow defenseman. They'll be able to help him out in that regard, trying to get used to the National Hockey League game. And Daniil Boot, similar in terms of the size. He's 6'6" and he's a winger. So I'm just telling you what, as a defenseman, when the puck is dumped in and you're going back on it and you've got someone who's 6'6" chasing you down, you hear footsteps pretty quickly. So I think he'll definitely be a force. And to go along with the size, the thing that really stands out to me is how good a hands he has in tight areas. I don't think there's any doubt he could stick handle in a phone booth. Now, the phone booth will probably need to be made for the size of a guy like Andre the Giant, but he definitely has enough skill to make plays in tight areas. And with that size, I could see him being a fixture on the power play, at some point in his career. Is it going to be next year? We'll have to wait and see. And I'm not going to start putting the cart before the horse, but he just has the tools and he's got the makeup of being a guy that can survive and thrive in dangerous areas around the net, in the corners. And lastly, both these guys won the championship in the KHL, the top Russian league. So they're coming off a season where they were champions. They know what it takes to win at that level. And hopefully the transition will be smooth for them here at the Utah Mammoth.
Nick Olczyk is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking all things hockey as a draft is coming up, NHL draft coming up shortly here. We're about a month away. And we all know this was the pleasant surprise of draft lotteries. Utah Jazz fans got the other end of that stick. But most likely you're going to pick at 14. Instead, you end up with pick number 4. The calculus is totally different. The caliber of player is totally different. The timeline for the guys in that top 5, top 6 are probably different than the guy that you get down at 14. You have any ideas where this team's going to go at 4?
I think there's a ton of options of what general manager Bill Armstrong can do. Look, I've got no insider information. There's a reason why Bill Armstrong gets paid the big bucks, and rightfully so. But I look at where this team is at. A lot of young studs, and we go up and down the roster of the Coolies and the Gunthers, and Michael Kessering really came into his own. But I wouldn't be surprised if could it be a trade package chip to go out and get a really impactful player that's a proven player. Now, look, anytime you can pick in the top 5, top 4, top 3, top 2, I mean, that you're going to get an impactful player. But the reality is, Sean, is that you just don't know. Yeah. You don't know for sure what that player is going to be a year from then, because unlike other sports, some of our fans may not know, these guys, when they're 18 and they get drafted, you don't go to the National Hockey League right away unless you're a Sidney Crosby or a Connor McDavid or an Alexander Ovechkin. There's a time and a developmental process where you go back to junior or you go to college and you play there and you grow, you get bigger, faster, stronger, or you go to the American Hockey League and you marinate and bake down there. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it does and could end up being included in a trade package to bring in a player that is proven at the National Hockey League level. So I think that is a possible route. But in terms of players, it really seems like Matthew Schaefer, the big 6'2" defenseman who played for Erie in the Ontario Hockey League last year, is the unanimous first overall pick. And Michael Misa, a really skilled center, will probably end up going too. And James Hagans, who had a heck of a year for the Boston College Eagles, at least from how the rankings have been the last time I looked, it seems like he's going to go number 3. And Jake O'Brien is another guy who played in the OHL. Brantford, a 6'2", 172-pound centerman, is a guy that at least in the NHL draft prospect rankings is currently ranked 4th. From a guy that his midterm rank was 8, so he really came on as the year went along. So we'll see how these things shake out, and I could be totally off the board based on how the Utah Hockey Club amateur scouting staff looks at their board and whatnot. But I just think that there are a lot of different options to where this team is at. They're not in a position where, oh my gosh, we're picking top 5. We need to keep filling our prospect pool and filling the farm. I think that they have done that to the point where, okay, now this team is ready to win. Now at least it opens up the possibility of using that as a trade chip. And I'll tell you what, for some other teams out there, that's a pretty damn big chip to play.
All right, I got to ask you because it's a topic we started the show with today. Pete DeBoer's, getting blasted a little bit, not only for pulling Jake Ottinger, but also for the justification that he gave to the media. And a lot of people interpreted that as he was maybe a little bit harsh on his goaltender. He was pointing fingers too much or whatever. You're much more of a hockey guy than I am. What did you think of that whole scenario? Pulling the goalie and then, of course, saying what you said about it.
Yeah, I love what Pete DeBoer did once his team got down 2-0, because the reality is that the Edmonton Oilers scored 2 goals on the first 2 shots of the game. So what he does first is he takes a timeout, and I think that's something that coaches can do. They really can do one of 2 things. A coach can directly impact a game with 2 ways: taking a timeout or pulling his goaltender in a game where the game is getting away from you. The other team scores 2 goals in 30 seconds, or they score 3 goals in a minute, and you're reeling, and you need to do everything you can to find a way to stop their momentum. So a coach will take a timeout. I love the idea of taking the timeout, but also to pull your goaltender, I just felt like that was a really extreme decision. Now, with that being said, Pete DeBoer has been one of the most successful coaches in the National Hockey League in recent times. So to question his decisions, obviously he has reasons for making those decisions. But I just thought taking the timeout at 2-0 down was the right decision. I would have left Jake Ottinger in, and then if he would have given up the 3rd goal, okay, then maybe you go and you yank him and you get him out. And Casey DeSmith ended up going in once he got pulled at 2-0. Gave up a goal, 3-0, and then the Dallas Stars were playing catch up from there on out. So, look, give credit to the Edmonton Oilers. They are the rightful Western Conference champions. It's going to be an unbelievable rematch against the Florida Panthers. But these are the decisions that these coaches get paid a lot of money for. And like I said, decision-wise, I like the timeout at 2-0. I would have left Ottinger in. And then you get to 3-0. Okay, then you got to get him out. But I just felt like that was an opportunity for DeBoer to really get the attention of his team. Because lastly, Sean, from a inside hockey scenario, as a player, when you're sitting on that bench and you're giving up goals and you're leaking like that, the biggest slap in the face is when your goaltender has to get pulled because of how you're playing in front of them. Unless they're 2 atrocious goals, and I don't think that those were 2 atrocious goals for Jake Ottinger. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out. And it sure seems like the heat has been really turned up high down in Dallas.
So Panthers or Oilers, who you got?
I had the pleasure of covering the Eastern Conference Final for Sports USA, and a huge thank you to executive producer and owner Larry Kahn for allowing me that opportunity to be part of the playoff coverage for my third season, and calling those games with the future Hall of Famer Johnny Forsland and the great Jim Fox. I was around the Panthers all series, seeing how they go about their day-to-day business. And Sean, it's not only a championship team, but it's a championship way of life. How they practice, how they handle themselves in the media, how they prepare for games, how they deal with wins, but more importantly, how they deal with losses and how they bounce back. I just think that this team is so deep. They've got superstar power where they need it. Brad Marchand was an unbelievable ad. Seth Jones, incredible ad about a week before the trade deadline, getting him out of Chicago and bringing him to a team that is uber competitive and ready for their second cup in a row. But I really think a standout guy in these playoffs was Nico Mikkola, 6'6" defenseman, offensive upside, mean and rough at the net front. So he is going to make life extremely difficult for the likes of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and the rest of the Edmonton Oilers. So with how Sergei Bobrovsky's playing, I always go, if it's up the middle, which I think it leans more towards the Panthers for me in terms of their depth and how they're playing. I always try to give the edge to a team that's got a proven goalie. And Sergei Bobrovsky in his mid-30s is as good as anybody, if not the very best in the league, which I think he is, and how this team is playing right now. But hey, what a great story it would be for the Edmonton Oilers to go to the Cup again and beat the team that beat them last year. Because we see teams that finally win, they don't just get there. There's trials, there's tribulations, there's before they win in those years prior, there's first round losses, there's Stanley Cup final losses, but they find a way to get over the hump. So I just think Florida's too deep. I think they've got the goalie advantage. So I've got Florida, but you can never underestimate the likes of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, because as we've seen, those two guys can win a game and win a series for a team.
All right, last thing before I let you go. Circling back to the Mammoth, we're a brand new hockey market, and the infrastructure is developing. What do you have to be a hockey family? You grew up in a hockey family, if I'm allowed to say that, and hockey families. My experience with them, when I was a young kid, I moved here when I was 9 from Minnesota, and we weren't a hockey family, but next door we had a hockey family. They were on the ice at 5 a.m. all week long. I mean, it's a different lifestyle. And we're going to start having hockey families here in Utah, in the Salt Lake City area, in the Valley, whatever. What does it take to be a hockey family, Nick?
Oh, Sean, it's a great question because hockey's been my life, and everything that I have, I owe to that game. I owe to the great game of hockey, and it's given my family and I everything, and I wouldn't rather have it any other way, because I think most importantly, it's the people that are involved in the game at all levels, whether it's players, coaches, fellow broadcasters, trainers, fans. Like it's the greatest game because it is about team. There's nothing individual about the game of hockey, and you could be a great player, you could be a great coach, you could be a great broadcaster, but if the rest of your team you're not on board with them, it's not going to be a successful product no matter what. So I just love the fact that it is family oriented, it is team oriented. And at the end of the day, as a family, you're a team. Everybody's got their role. Everybody knows what they have to do for the family to succeed. But to be a hockey family, look, first you got to like the game. You got to really enjoy the game of hockey. And I really hope that in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, there's a boatload of hockey players that are being drafted or signed into the NHL that are from Salt Lake City or are from Park City or are from Orem or are from wherever around the great state of Utah because of what the Utah Hockey Club and now the Utah Mammoth did to bring hockey and not just bring the sport and the spectacle and the atmosphere, but to bring opportunities for kids to play. And it starts at the very top with Ryan and Ashley Smith and the incredible resources they've given the community, not just to bring the team here, but donating a whole lot of money to build rinks, learn to play programs for kids all around the state, learn to skate programs for not just kids, but for older people that want to try and just get on the ice too. So I just think if you like the game, that's where it all starts. And hopefully if families have the ability to just give your kid the opportunity, just give them the chance through the Utah Mammoth, learn to play programs and get them on the ice. And look, they could love it and they could never play a lick of travel hockey or competitive hockey, and that's fine. Because whether you play in the NHL and you want to have a great long career and that's your goal or not, the exercise you get from the game of hockey, the life lessons you learn, and the people you meet, those are the things to me that make it so great, because those are eternal for all of our lives.
Thanksgiving dinner, you're the only guy sitting around with a Utah Mammoth sweater on. Everyone else has got Kraken gear. You're gonna see if you can fix it.
I am gonna come home this year bearing a lot of gifts with Mammoth logos on it for my entire family, especially my young nieces and nephews. So I'm gonna get them outfitted as quickly as possible. But Sean, just quickly, I mean, I think that the team and the organization, and look, yes, I'm sure there's people out there that's saying, of course you're going to say this because they cut your check. And while that's true, I just think the organization has done such a phenomenal job for this team to put a team on the ice that's competitive, that's exciting, that has players that everybody can get behind. But that's one part of it. The other part that I think is just as, if not more important, is what they've done for the community. And we talked about it with getting kids to learn how to play the game, but also the community initiatives, getting the players out in the community, the things that I've had the honor of doing. I just think we got something really, really special here. It's a pressure cooker here in Utah, and the fandom was great, and it was exceptional, and it was growing last year. I just can't wait to see next year and in the future the kind of influence and entertainment that the Utah Mammoth can bring to the great people here in Utah, because this, as I've learned in now my 8.5 months of being here, this is an extremely special place and nowhere I'd rather be personally.
Well, you're doing a phenomenal job. We're glad to have you here. Thanks so much for your time on the show today, and let's chat again soon.
Absolutely, Sean. Always happy to do so. Pleasure being on, and keep up the great work.
Lots left to get to on the Sean O'Connell Show. That is Nick Olczyk, analyst for the Mammoth, and he was on that Eastern Conference Final for Sports USA as well. Really, really phenomenal stuff. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, Utah's #1 sports talk.
Robinson free. He is on target. Caught by Robinson. 4.5 in the first quarter.
I like how Towns got up on that pick and roll.
Whoa! He has been a first quarter machine tonight. Jalen Brunson.
Back-to-back three-pointers for Jalen Brunson. Knicks won Game 5 over the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals at the Garden. That sound courtesy of TNT Sports. The win for the Knicks, I guess, extends the life of NBA basketball on TNT Sports, at least for another game. Kevin Harlan on the call. We'll have Game 6 here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM tomorrow night with coverage starting at 6. We are your home of the NBA playoffs. Tony Jones, our NBA insider from The Athletic, is kind enough to join us to talk all things hoop. Tony, welcome to the show on a Friday. How are you?
I am good. TNT also has the French Open, and it's been wonderful because we've got three Americans that we know are going to make the fourth round and possibly a fourth. And, that's unheard of. And Tommy Paul does nothing but play 5 sets.
Are we talking tennis right now, Tony? Are we going to take a left turn? Are we going to talk Roland Garros?
Did you not know, I am a tennis fanatic. I love tennis.
Tennis is amazing. Do you play as much tennis as you play basketball?
I have not played tennis or picked up a tennis racket since I was 15 years old when I was a freshman in high school. And they made you play a second sport to, complement your dominant sport. So my dominant sport was obviously basketball. So I had to play a secondary sport, and I played tennis for that 1 year. And let's just say I struggled a little bit.
Well, that makes my admiration for you grow even more because I'm the type of person, I'm the petty kind of guy that if I'm really bad at a sport, I find fault with the sport and I don't really enjoy watching it as much.
So did you play tennis or no?
I never played organized tennis. I took an individual sport class like my freshman year of college that had a tennis unit where we had 6 weeks of tennis, and that was fun. I'm not terrible at tennis. I like watching tennis, but soccer, I was never good at soccer. So instead of being I'll just watch soccer and enjoy it that way, I've taken it upon myself to decide soccer is not worth time for anyone.
Well, that could be true. So I did tennis 1 year, and for my secondary sport another year, I did cross country, and I was amazing at that. I was pushing out really good numbers, good cross country numbers. But I was boring, so I was the fastest runner on the team. But I was bored, so I hardly showed up to practice or anything. And then at the team banquet at the end, they gave the team MVP to another runner who pretty much just actually showed up at practice because they couldn't give it to me. So, the tennis, the cross country coach was like, so our team MVP is not our fastest runner, but he is our most consistent.
Oh my gosh!
Everybody knew it was because I would just would just show up on race days, and I wasn't doing anything else. So yeah, that was fun. That was pretty fun as well.
Did you ever have a basketball teammate that was the equivalent of that, the most talented guy, the best guy, but just was disinterested and not dedicated to it?
Oh, I had a few. But I played with, more than a few NBA guys that went on to the NBA.
But didn't you also, when there was that person who was so talented and was better than you at basketball, even though you were passionate about it, didn't you kind of hate that person where you're just come on, man, you're wasting this?
I had a teammate named Ya Davis, and he had the worst attitude ever. And he went on to play at St. Joseph's. He was a starter on the St. Joseph's team in '97 that went to the Sweet 16. And he had the worst attitude ever. And he should have went on to play in the NBA. And we used to just look, and he would, throw temper tantrums in practice. nothing would happen to him. And, eventually he would throw temper tantrums, and we'd have to run 20 laps for his temper tantrums. So, yeah, he's the closest example of that question right there.
Yeah, I want to do, maybe this is good summer radio, James. Maybe we'll do this. There's always a best that never was from every school, from every neighborhood. Like maybe we could do that in July where we just bring people on and be like, tell me the person you played with in high school that should have been in the NFL, should have been in the NBA, should have been something great, and just didn't have the mind for it, because everybody knew at least one person like that. And depending on where you're from, you probably knew 3 or 4.
Yes, I knew more than one, but his first name was Arthur. So Arthur Davis was the guy that I played with, and that was on my team. I mean, he would like cuss each other because I was the point guard. So we used to have a couple of sets where, I had the option to go to his side or go to another side, and he would like literally like OC. He would threaten to beat me up if I didn't come and run the play to his side. Like, so the Philly slang was, I'm going to slide you. And so he would say, Tone, if you don't run this play to my side, I'm going to slide you. And then I would be like, well, say no more. I'd run the play to his side.
I do not wish to be slid, sir.
Hey, listen, I'll just give you the ball and, just get out of the way. And eventually, my coach, Mr. Miller, Vince Miller, he would be like, why do you keep running this play to the right side? Like, you have the option to run it to the right side or the left side. And I didn't want to tell him. I'm like, sir, there's things on the line here. And yeah, it was playing with y'all was interesting, to say the least.
Oh, it's amazing. Let's talk some Eastern Conference Finals here. Your Knicks took Game 5 in impressive fashion, although I know Pascal Siakam did not like the line of questioning from Greg Doyle after, but there's something there that it felt like the Pacers were kind of like, all right, well, this one we're going to phone it in. What am I missing here? Was that really just a truly dominant Knicks performance, or did the Pacers let the foot off the gas pedal?
Well, I mean, both things can be true. The thing with Greg Doyle and Pascal Siakam is this: Pascal can't say the quiet part out loud, and the quiet part out loud is the Knicks were able to drum up a certain amount of desperation that the Pacers just didn't have, and it's human nature, right? Like,
for sure,
you're up 3-1. You're in you're back in the Garden. The Knicks are going to be playing for their lives on their home floor. Human nature says you just cannot drum up that kind of a sense of urgency. It's just impossible. And maybe you out execute the sense of urgency. Maybe you're just that much better than the team with the sense of urgency, and you can out execute that team on that day. But it's hard to play with that amount of energy. Like, wait until tomorrow. The Pacers are going to be at home. It's going to be Game 6. They have some serious pressure on them, and they know that if they lose Game 6, they got to go back to Madison Square Garden for Game 7. The Pacers are going to play like their lives depend on it, because for them it's essentially a one-game season. Just like for the Knicks, it's essentially a one-game season. So you're going to see a lot more of a higher level, a lot more high level of energy from the Pacers. Well, Pascal Siakam can't get up on the podium and say that, right? Like, he can't just be like, yeah, well, the Knicks had a sense of urgency that we just couldn't match because of us being up 3-1. You can't get up there and say that. So that's why, you can't get up there and say that. He knows he can't say that. He's frustrated at the line of questioning. Greg Doyle isn't the most tactful reporter
He's not overly popular with any athletes that he covers, to be fair.
Right. And he's good at getting a reaction. And so because of all of those factors, you got what you got, that kind of exchange on last night. So, the Knicks played a wonderful game. My Knicks played a wonderful game. Jalen Brunson played a wonderful game. But, frankly, all we did at this point was extend the series for 48 hours. Now if we go to Indiana and win Game 6, then obviously, it's a new thing and it's a different thing. But right now, nothing is really accomplished except for earning another flight back to Indianapolis for Game 6.
So you don't sound overly sold on the Knicks' ability to extend it further after Game 6. If I'm an Indiana Pacers fan, it's not the San Antonio Spurs from a decade ago. This is a group that has not been here in a long time. This is a group that we don't know exactly how they're going to react when you turn up the pressure. I understand the human nature. I think you're absolutely dead on that the human nature element is that you kind of let up a little bit and you allow the Knicks to extend. Does this team have the necessary gas to now say, all right, you got your rest night. Let's go out and let's put this thing to bed. Don't let the Knicks really give themselves actual real hope.
Well, they should, because they're the deeper team. They play at a really fast pace. The shots that role players missed at Madison Square Garden, you typically make at home. Tyrese Halliburton's not going to go out and score 8 points in Game 6. It's going to be a different thing, and it's going to be a different level. The question for Game 6 is not whether Indiana is going to play well. I'm 95% sure that Indiana is going to play well. The question to me is whether the Knicks are going to meet that level and exceed that level, and that's going to determine, whether Game 6 is a closeout game for the Pacers, or if we get a Game 7. It's just like Game 5 in the Western Conference Finals. Number one, I knew that series was over because I thought Minnesota threw the kitchen sink at Oklahoma City in Game 4. And, having that kind of a loss, that kind of a 2-point loss in Game 4, that kind of a crushing loss mentally, I just knew that, Minnesota was done in Game 5. And I thought that was going to be a 25-point game, and it turns out I undersold it. It ended up being a 30-point game. But the difference between that series and the Knicks series is, the Knicks had a Game 5 at home down 3-1 instead of having a Game 5 on the road down 3-1. So Game 6 is actually Minnesota's Game 5 in terms of having to win a road game to stay alive. But I do think the Knicks have a little bit more belief than Minnesota had. I think they'll be more resilient than Minnesota was. But the Pacers are going to come out and they're going to give a wallop tomorrow night, and it's going to be just a question of whether the Knicks can weather that storm, or whether they kind of get snowed under by that storm.
You just referenced Tyrese Halliburton's 8 points. He's supposed to be making his superstar turn in this playoff. Is that acceptable? I know, you already explained the whole dynamic, and we're on board there. But 8 points from a star player in a playoff game that could be an eliminator for your opponent feels like that's too lackadaisical.
Yeah, the thing with Tyrese is that his scoring doesn't accentuate his value. He's one of those guys that can score 8 points and dominate a game. Now, he played awful last night, but it wasn't because of the 8 points. It was just because of the lack of playmaking pressure that he put on New York. Just the lack of an overall impact that he had. He could go in Game 6 and score that same 8 points, but he could also have 15 assists and 10, 11 rebounds, and he's getting into the lane, consistently touching the paint off the dribble, and he's kicking out for wide open threes, and boom, the Indiana Pacers score 130 points. He's one of those unique guys that I don't think that we can measure his value. Next to the number of points that he scores, and that's different than somebody like, say, an Anthony Edwards, who, Minnesota doesn't have a chance unless you go out and score 30. And it's not that way with Indiana. They have kind of an equal opportunity system, that's kind of unique to a lot of the rest of the NBA. But, to your point, like he did not play well on Thursday night at all. He was just kind of out there, and he was just kind of a guy. And that's what the Pacers can't have. And that's part of the star level that he brings. Like, he has to be impactful no matter what he's doing. He just can't go out and be a guy. And I thought last night that he was just a guy, and that's one of the reasons why the Pacers look so lost as a team offensively.
All right, last thing before I let you go, do your Knicks survive the weekend?
Yeah, I'm going to say no because, like you said, I think it's going to be very, very, very difficult for them to win a closeout Game 6 in Indianapolis. That arena is going to be rocking. It's going to be all gold. The Pacers are going to make every shot. They're going to be energized. It was really obvious that they played a low-level game last night, and they're not going to play the same low-level game. The Knicks, we've been fighting for our lives. Jalen essentially had to go out and carry us to get us. There's just a lot of things that are going against us. So I expect Indiana to win on Saturday night.
Well, enjoy the weekend one way or another, Tony. Always appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
I will not enjoy the weekend if we lose.
You can still find a way.
Thank you so much for those kind words.
Rest of the weekend, watch some tennis instead. That's Tony Jones from The Athletic, NBA insider. Covers the Jazz, covers the Nuggets, covers the whole NBA. PGA Tour leaderboard update is coming, and maybe the most unsurprising information ever about Utah Jazz fans. Next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Brian Fonseca is going to join us from NewJersey.com, NJ.com. He's a Rutgers beat writer. We'll talk a little Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey as the Jazz start to figure out, well, not start to figure out, in the process of figuring out what to do with pick number 5. Can you move up? Is somebody like Bailey attainable? Is he worth it if you can move up? We'll discuss all that with Brian Fonseca. Time for a PGA Tour leaderboard update brought to you by our friends at Uinta Golf. New Pro V1 and Pro V1X from Titleist bring you more speed and control than ever before. They're now available at Uinta Golf Shops by Worldwide Golf. What's going on at the Memorial, James Peterson?
Ben Griffin, still your leader at
nice
7
Ben.
under. He's even through 7 holes today. He's not the sole leader though. A couple of guys have caught up to him, including Colin Morikawa. He's also among the 3 tied for the lead. And for me, a little-known Canadian, maybe for more avid golf fans, he's a name that you recognize. But Nick Taylor is also tied for the lead at 7 under. And he's 4 under for the day so far, OC, through 13 holes. So he's made quite the run to catch up to Ben Griffin and Colin Morikawa. They're all again tied for the lead at 7 under. Their their second rounds, are still in progress. Your PGA Championship winner, the Wanamaker Trophy winner, Scotty Scheffler, number 1 player in the world. You may have heard of him. He is tied for second at 4 under, 3 shots off the lead, getting to the end of his round through 16 holes, 2 under for the day. So good day for Scotty. Tony Finau making his way. He's higher on the leaderboard than he was yesterday, but his score is slightly worse, OC, somehow. He is 1 over. But he's still got 7 holes left to play. That's just through 11 holes. 1 over for the day. He finished yesterday at even. He's tied for 16th, so 8 shots off the lead. And we've seen Tony and others in worse, and there's plenty of other players in this tournament in worse position than where Tony is. But he's got to take advantage of these last 7 holes and take advantage of moving day tomorrow. Saturdays on the PGA Tour, obviously, moving day. So that's your PGA Tour leaderboard update.
Brought to you by Uinta Golf. Go grab Pro V1, Pro V1X from Titleist. More speed, more control for you or for Dad with Father's Day coming up. All right, we'll take a quick one here. We'll come back and we'll talk Utah Jazz draft prospects. Brian Fonseca has been covering Rutgers. He's got some insight on Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Sean O'Connell Show continues on a Friday. Airing of grievances is in 33 minutes. Get your grievances ready. It's Utah's number 1 sports talk, ESPN 700. Welcome to hour number 3 on the Sean O'Connell Show. Airing of grievances comes in 28 minutes. 877-353-0700 at Real OC Sports. Anytime you want to air a grievance on a Friday, well, that's what we do at 1:30. James has some grievances. I've got one that might come across as a hot take. I don't know. People might not like my grievance. They might have a grievance with my grievance. But guess what? That's just par for the course.
I typically always have a grievance with your grievances.
Okay.
So
All right.
join the club.
All right, we're going to see if we can get Brian Fonseca to talk some draft prospects as the Utah Jazz prepare for this upcoming NBA draft. Utah Mammoth also preparing for the upcoming NHL draft. We talked a little bit of that with Nick Olczyk. Great conversation with him. Really happy that he brought us on. One thing that, we were talking in the conversation about hockey families and like, the hockey family thing is what begets hockey culture, and then hockey culture in a community begets hockey players from that community. And he expressed a desire, and I echo this, and I think we've expressed it on the show before. I think that by the time Utah is hosting another Olympic Games, you should be maybe producing some elite talent. Maybe not ready to skate for the Olympic team, Team USA yet, but like you're going to be building toward that. And when you see the investment in the community and you see the opportunity for anybody really to take their kids out to a learn to skate program, learn to play hockey program. I mean, junior Jazz basketball might not be responsible for AJ DeBonsa, but the basketball culture in Utah has been strong. And then the rise of Ute Conference football and coaching getting better at every single level and specialization and that kind of stuff. Now Utah always had talented players, right? It was kind of flyover under the radar kind of a situation. The great programs in the country now poach talent from the state of Utah. Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, they're grabbing guys from the state of Utah. It's only a matter of time before that happens with hockey. And James, I looked it up while we were talking with Nick Olczyk. One thing that I really hope we see, and we have not yet seen, what happens when you take a Polynesian athlete and you raise them in hockey? It's going to be a while, all right, because it's not something that people are overly familiar with, but you got a bunch. We have a large Polynesian population in the state of Utah, right? We now have grassroots programs for hockey. That by itself probably doesn't create the marriage, but at some point, it's unavoidable that at some point there's going to be a Kaufusi or a Finau or a something that is playing hockey, and I want to know what that looks like.
I actually love the thought of that. I hadn't thought of it till you brought that up, but that just think about where Polynesians originate from. To think that they would ever play hockey
but
is just a fun thought.
It's like the Jamaican bobsled team.
Yes, that's exactly where my mind went too.
But here's the thing, right? I mean, the profile there's a reason why in the NFL there's at least one Polynesian player on every roster, and there's multiple on most rosters. You're talking about a collection of tiny island nations. It is in the United States of America. The Pacific Islanders are the smallest ethnic minority in the United States of America, and yet overly represented in physical sports like football for obvious reasons, rugby for obvious reasons. There's a lot more of a regional connection there. You don't have the regional connection with hockey, but the physicality, the athleticism required, the mentality required is remarkably similar. And by the way, you know how, like, I don't know, I feel like I get to say these things because I grew up in football with Polynesian friends and teammates, and I feel a deep, deep affection and appreciation for a lot of the culture. I don't pretend I am the culture, but I know the culture pretty well. And, like, a lot of the times what you see from, and it's largely based on the way people are raised, but what you see from, like, the Manti Te'o type athletes of the world. Great player, right? And just a humble individual. It's very hockey.
It's true. Well, and listen, I grew up around a fair number of Polynesians as well. Growing up in St. George, one of my best friends in high school was obviously from St. George originally, but family came from Samoa. Really good basketball player too. So basically, what I learned from an early age is that Polynesians, even though they're typecast as physical players, rugby players, football players, and these collision physical sports, which hockey certainly applies, they can pretty much the really athletic guys who want to play sports can pretty much play any sport at a really high level. And we don't see a ton of Polynesians in the NBA yet, but I wouldn't doubt that someday we're gonna have a good number of Polynesians in the NBA if there's any that want to aspire to that. Like, they're really good athletes, so why wouldn't they?
Jabari Parker's half.
That's a good point. So why wouldn't they eventually? Why wouldn't we eventually start seeing Polynesian hockey players? Because they're good athletes, and like you said, have the ability to be very physical, which you need to be in hockey.
By the way, Utah Mammoth, this is an idea. You're welcome, right? Take Utah Mammoth hockey, because there's a branding initiative going on right now. Yes, grassroots here in Salt Lake City. Take Utah Mammoth hockey, do an exhibition game in Hawaii. Like, let's just establish a pipeline here. Am I up in the night? How amazing would this be? And I looked it up. There has never been a player of Polynesian descent in the NHL. James, we could start this now. There has never been a Samoan, Tongan, Maori, Fijian player in NHL hockey. We can make it happen, and that person can be from Utah. All right? So if you're out there listening and you happen to be from an island heritage and your kid just wants to play some cool sports, hockey's a great one. Let's get it going. As long as we're talking about the state of Utah and our unique nature here, James put this on my radar, and it's absolutely fantastic. Vegas Insider did a bit of research on the most foul-mouthed fan bases in the United States, the most negative fan bases in the United States, the most positive fan bases in the United States. They went to Reddit, they went to message boards, and they decided that, all right, we're going to base this data on community-sourced fan expression of their either pleasure or their distaste or whatever with the franchise. So they ranked all of these NBA franchises by vulgarity and negativity and positivity. They even researched the go-to swear words used by fan bases. But just to refresh everyone about the reputation that the Utah Jazz might have with NBA players when it comes to these things, here's a little bit of sound from an old friend of the Utah Jazz fan base, Russell Westbrook.
You want a refreshing drink? Obey your thirst.
Russell, there were a couple times where you, coming out of the into the tunnel, you confronted a fan. What happened in those instances?
I don't confront fans. Fans confront me. Here in Utah, man, a lot of disrespectful, vulgar things are said to the players here with these fans, man. It's truly disrespectful. Talk about your families, your kids, and it's just a disrespect to the game, man. I think it's something that needs to be brought up. And I'm tired of just going out and playing and letting fans say what the hell they want to say. I'm not with that, because if I was on the street, they wouldn't just come up to me and say anything crazy, because I don't play that. So I just think it's disrespectful when they get the chance to do whatever they want to do. It needs to be put to a stop, especially here in Utah.
High profile, very famous incident, right? And
this was, just to be clear, this was from the playoffs before the incident you're talking about with the guy who got kicked out.
Yeah, okay, different deal.
Said some things that Russell Westbrook and others interpreted as racist. But this was from the playoffs before, when he was, that whole series, he was yelling at the crowd when this was the series that Joe Ingles also broke Paul George in the middle of the series with his trash talk, and Playoff P was famously debunked in that series. So then, like less than a year later in the regular season, he has the incident with the fan. So it seemed to originate with this playoff series that Westbrook really started to not like Utah Jazz fans and felt like they were vulgar and disrespectful.
Which we're not here to refute that because
no, absolutely not.
Especially in that regular season situation the following year that you're referencing. They did an investigation basically, and it wasn't much of an investigation because the other fans were like, "Yeah, that guy's the problem."
Yeah, and he has not been allowed back at the arena still since. So it's 6 years later.
By the way, I know this from a factual standpoint. I can't remember that guy's name. I don't want to bring it up anyway. That guy was in the process of attempting to work for a certain company that I had a connection to, and that incident affected his status with trying to work for that company. So you always got to remember there's cameras everywhere. There's smartphones. People know, right? So, every fan base is guilty of this. I don't think Utah's the worst. I don't think Utah's the best. There's often a certain connotation, and there's, generally it becomes a racially charged sort of conversation about whether or not Utah's a good place for visiting teams to come play, especially in the NBA world. But the Vegas Insider research,
they're proving that Westbrook was wrong back then, and he's still wrong today.
Well, whether or not people were being disrespectful
At least on
to
Reddit.
him, that's a different deal than whether or not people are being vulgar on Reddit and on message boards. So every team's got their own subreddit where conversation is happening, right? And I don't know why they decided this was research, but I love that they did it. The most vulgar fan base, the percentage of comments total, like across the sample that they pulled, the percentage of vulgar comments, meaning swear words and other such offensive language, perhaps unsurprisingly, the New York Knicks, the number one most vulgar fan base.
I know it was like, okay, if you just said the Knicks or Sixers or Celtics fans, I wouldn't have batted an eye at any of those.
Yeah,
so
Philadelphia,
it's not
you're assuming. Boston, you're assuming.
So I'm not surprised at all that the Knicks are one of the
top five are actually New York number one, Memphis number two, the Indiana Pacers fan base number three most vulgar, Dallas Mavericks, and Minnesota Timberwolves. I think this might be unfair to Dallas because they had a lot of reason to be cussing in the comments. This season.
I wonder if there's a way if they've done this every year. Maybe we can look back at past years and see where Dallas landed, because that's probably more reflective of how vulgar that fan base is on Reddit or otherwise, more than this year was.
Well, something's brewing in the Midwest. Indiana
Seriously.
And Minnesota, and then Detroit is number 6.
And Memphis is right there, Midwest / South.
That's the South.
That's the South, but not that far from the Midwest. Like
Minnesota, what are you cursing about? Like, you had a really good team this year.
And last year.
By the way, this information is not from after they got eliminated from the playoffs. This is regular season type stuff. So those are the 5 most vulgar fan bases. Philadelphia came in at number 9.
Low for them.
Very low. This is one of the really interesting things here. So the least vulgar fan bases, according to the data compiled, Charlotte, Washington Wizards, San Antonio Spurs, the Portland Trail Blazers, and, of course, the least vulgar of all, the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz do not curse when they're commenting about their team nearly as much as New York Knicks fans. 3% of the comments from Utah Jazz fans featured vulgar language. 8.5% from the New York Knicks fans, which, by the way, is more than 1% higher than anyone else. They're extra vulgar in New York. Now, this is where it gets really weird, though. You know who is the 6th least vulgar? Brooklyn Nets fans.
Yeah,
they're in the same city.
Same city.
Brooklyn Nets fans, it's like they're the hipsters. They're a little bit less vulgar, a little bit more polite.
Maybe
Brooklyn is
maybe because there's significantly less Nets fans than the Knicks fan base.
But it's a percentage of their own comments.
You're right. I don't know. Maybe they felt the least relevant your team is. Maybe there's a correlation or a causation with that and how vulgar you are. If you've got some expectations and you lose and you lose a game that you should have won, get on Reddit and say a bunch of crazy stuff that's really vulgar, and I'm really mad. When Sixers were 9, we expected them to be higher on this list. They had a terrible year, so it's like, they lost again, whatever. Jazz, they lost again, whatever. Nets, they've been doing that for almost their whole franchise's existence. I don't know.
I love that they decided to pull which swear word was the favorite of each fan base. If a post from a Knicks fan was vulgar, there was nearly a 50% chance that it had the F word in it, which is just cracks me up. Knicks fans are just dropping that thing like nothing. Now, this I think is more interesting. Swear words, who cares? I don't. Some people do. I watch R-rated movies. Doesn't bother me. Cursing is part of the lexicon of athletics. Unfortunately or fortunately or whatever, there's a lot of swearing. I am like you that if I'm at a game with my kids, I'm at like a Bees game or a Mammoth game or whatever, I don't want people just cursing up a storm where the kids can hear. So I don't do that when I'm at games. But, I'm not going to pretend like I've got the cleanest language in the world. What interests me more is this other piece of information. Negativity.
Yes.
Who brings the most negativity to the conversation around their teams? Sentiment analysis was also done. On Reddit, you can flag comments for being vulgar. You could flag comments for being negative. You could flag comments for being positive, whatever. So who are the most negative fan bases in the NBA? First of all, the number 1 rank this year goes to – this one is forgivable and totally understandable. Dallas Mavericks fans, 32% of the total comments were negative, which honestly I thought would be higher because internet comments in general usually skew very negative. Dallas Mavericks were the most negative fan base this year. Again, that is definitely not unrelated to the Luka trade.
But two 4-letter F words used before Nico Harrison and all those comments. Fire Nico Harrison, and the other one I can't say. You know what I'm talking about. So, yes, and those could be, especially the other one, be deemed as both vulgar and negative.
But tell me why why are you the number 2 most negative fan base? Boston Celtics fans? You're coming off a championship.
The Celtics are always good. Since they traded for Kevin Garnett, summer of 2007, there's been like 2, maybe 1 losing season.
This is why Boston sports fans are so insufferable, even though they have been absolutely spoiled across the board.
Just means more, OC.
Every one of their sports has brought them a championship pretty much in the last couple of decades.
Since 2000, all four of their Boston area sports teams, of course, New England is outside Boston technically, but Boston area sports teams that they claim have all won championships. Now the Bruins have been the least successful, but they still won a championship in the last 25 years. You're right. Like,
what are you complaining about, Celtics fans? Seriously. Number 3, again, not super understandable, the Minnesota Timberwolves. If we were talking about 2010, sure, be negative. Minnesota Timberwolves, the 3rd most negative. Memphis Grizzlies, the 4th most negative. Philadelphia 76ers, the 5th. And the Knicks came in at number 6. Okay, so the fans who like to curse, for the most part, are also the fans who like to complain and be negative. The Utah Jazz were not the most positive fan base in basketball. That distinction belongs to the San Antonio Spurs fan base. which is actually pretty admirable because there would be a lot of reason for negativity when your franchise cornerstone, your big-time favorite guy, Victor Wembanyama, he goes down with a season-ending injury. Of course, you had something to kind of mitigate that. De'Aaron Fox, a big addition. Stephon Castle being Rookie of the Year. In any case, the San Antonio Spurs, the most positive. The Washington Wizards, second most positive. Portland Trailblazers, third most positive. The Utah Jazz, the fourth most positive fan base. In a tanking year, when you are the worst you could possibly be, the Utah Jazz fan base remained pretty positive. All right, we'll take a few minutes here. We'll talk with Brian Fonseca about the Rutgers players coming out in this year's NBA draft. Utah Jazz holding on to that number 5 pick. Rutgers insider Brian Fonseca joins us from NJ.com. Brian, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. I think I want to focus more on Ace Bailey. I'm of the opinion that even if the Jazz wanted to trade up, they would not be able to get into the 1 or the 2 spot. That's where I expect Dylan Harper to go, number 2. We'll get there here in a second. But let's talk a little Ace Bailey. The ceiling as you perceive it and the floor for him with this draft, where's the highest you could see him going and the farthest he could possibly fall?
Well, I think it's that's the $1 million question, right? Like, I think he has the highest ceiling and the lowest floor of NBA prospect I can remember in a long time. So I can see a team kind of taking a gamble on him at 3, like the Sixers. Certainly I could see that happening, or I could see teams being a bit skeptical about, the negativities in his game and letting him kind of slip. So like, sometimes we see guys in the NFL, Shedeur Sanders is an easy example, but I think there are so many great things about Ace's game, but there are so many other things that would give me pause if I was an NBA and GM. So I don't know. I think the ceiling is 2. I think a team at 2 that wants to trade up and really believes in him could take him. I think that's unlikely. What's more likely, I could see him falling to, 8, 9, 10. Who really knows?
So when you talk about maybe some of those red flags, what is the primary one, or maybe the couple primary ones for you that you're like, God, this is why you should think twice before drafting Ace Bailey, even if the Jazz stay put at 5?
I think there's a ton, right? Like, I think so. His main strength is his shot making. He's like, some of the shots he makes are things that only he and a handful of other guys in the NBA are able to make. But the issue is that he takes so many shots that are so hard that some of them are about to go in. I guess my point is the shot selection is very questionable, and he had the ultimate green light to do that at Rutgers, and I don't think an NBA team will be willing to put up with that because a lot of the other holes in his game, his defense isn't great. He has great defensive ability as far as his tools, his length, his size, his athleticism. He could be a great shot blocker, but he's not very disciplined on that end and can become a bit aloof there and leave guys open. His assist ratio is horrendous. He really does not pass the ball. He's not very conducive to a team game, right? Like, when you think of the peak of team basketball with the Spurs earlier last decade, he is the antithesis of that. Takes a ton of shots, does not pass a lot, so he'd be much of a black hole on offense. So I think if a team is able to instill offensive discipline in him and instill defensive discipline in him, I guess the discipline is what's missing here. He's a very young prospect in age and basketball knowledge, I think. So I think a team that takes him is going to take a gamble on not how good he'll be next season, but how good he could be in 5 years if they're able to put it all together with him. Because I think if they are able to put everything together with him, this is a guy who can be an all-NBA caliber player. I just think that's a pretty big gamble to take.
How concerned should NBA teams be about the fact that with Ace Bailey and even with Dylan Harper, they didn't really learn to win in their stop in college? I mean, to have 2 top lottery players on the same team in the same lineup and not make the tournament, to me is like, well, that's a red flag, more for the program than for the players necessarily. But it does extend to the players in that you weren't in a place where you were taught how to win. And I think that's something that might matter when you get to this next level.
I certainly agree. It's more of a indictment on the program than it is the players. I think they were not able to put anywhere near enough talent around those 2 kids, and I think it was more Rutgers failing those 2 kids than it was the inverse. I think Dylan Harper, if he was in a better situation, would have been a first-team All-NBA, first-team All-Big Ten, maybe first-team All-American. Like, this is one of the best guards at getting to the rim, finishing, distributing. Like, sorry about that. I don't know if you can hear my GPS. Sorry about that. But I think Dylan Harper was like an elite prospect that, if he had talent around him, could have received the recognition he deserved. Ace Bailey, I can understand the argument about conducive to winning because he does not play winning basketball. That's the truth. He takes bad shots, and a lot of the basketball that he does is about himself. Again, he's taking really tough shots that look good for him when they go in, are really bad for the team when they don't. So I guess if you're looking to draft Dylan Harper, don't worry about the winning. I think he's a winning player. With Ace Bailey, I could certainly see your point, and I think twice or three times about it.
What kind of rebounder do you think Ace Bailey is going to be at the next level?
I think he could be a good one. I think he certainly took that coaching point well with Steve Peichel, who's rebounding and defense is his bread and butter. So I think the desire is there and the physical tools are there. Now, it's one thing to do that against Big Ten players. It's another thing to do it in the NBA. Though I would argue maybe rebounding in the NBA is maybe easier as far as effort, at least in the regular season. So I think he could be, again, his ceiling is that of a really good rebounder and a really good defensive player. But when you're talking about Ace Bailey, like the extremes are so high that it's impossible to project what he could be.
Do either of these Rutgers guys want to end up in Salt Lake City, Utah?
I think it would be really good for Ace Bailey to do so. I think to just get away from everywhere, be in a place where he can just focus on basketball. I think for Dylan Harper, anywhere would be good for him. I think he can thrive really anywhere, whether that's the big city, whether that's a smaller market. So I think for Ace, it would be really beneficial if you ask my opinion. I don't know if he personally wants to be there, but it might be good for him.
Well, his dad famously had to walk back some comments he made about like, hey, I don't want my kid playing in Utah. Obviously, that he was part of teams that battled it out with the Jazz and walked it back. But that is something I don't think the Jazz have a chance to move up to 2 to get Dylan Harper. But let's talk about him for a second. You already referenced he's one of the great guards in college basketball this year. Seems like the NBA is very high on him. He'd probably be the number 1 pick if it wasn't for Cooper Flagg. No way he drops below 2 in your mind, right?
I would be surprised because even if the Spurs don't take him, I think they can use the pick as a way to get a big package, whether that's the Bucks for Giannis I've seen that talked about a lot, or any other team that kind of wants to move up. So I don't think so. I think he's probably the most solid prospect. I don't think he has the highest ceiling of the group, but I think he has the highest floor by far. Like the worst I could see him being is a solid, 10-year NBA vet. And I think the questions about him, his ceiling are fair as far as his athleticism, his lateral quickness, and like what separates the great players from the elite players. But I think his floor is just so high as far as a guy who can get to the rim, who knows what it takes to win, who can contribute to a team game, pass the ball, and make his teammates better. So I think he's a guy that maybe won't take your team to the next level, but we've seen teams built on a ton of solid guys with one elite guy. He can really be that second or third option on a really, really good team.
All right, Brian, let's say that Ryan Smith, Utah Jazz owner, calls you and says, hey, we're staying at 5. Ace Bailey's available at 5. Should we use that pick on Ace Bailey at number 5? What's your answer?
You're putting me on the spot. I don't know. That's why they don't pay me millions of dollars to make that decision. But I just think if you're willing to take a gamble, I think he can make you look like the smartest person in basketball. But he can also make you look like a fool in 5 years. I mean, it's the ultimate mystery box, right? Like it's really if you think you have a system that can develop a guy, put him in a place where he can focus entirely on basketball, work out the kinks in his game, I think it's worth it. If you don't think you have that, I don't think it's worth a shot. It really depends on the situation.
Before I let you go, what's Rutgers basketball going to look like without these 2 guys next year? They didn't even make the tournament with them.
Really, really rough because they didn't really replace them with any talent out of the transfer portal or the freshman class or a couple of international prospects. I think if you think, I would guess bottom 3 in the Big Ten. That's my guess for them. I think even the ceiling could be 9th, 10th. I don't really project a good future for Rutgers basketball.
Brian, appreciate your time and your insight today. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend.
You too. Thanks so much for having me on.
Ryan Fonseca from NJ.com covering Rutgers on the beat. Airing of grievances is next. I got a hot take for you. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
Let's go Stars is the continuous chant here at American Airlines Center as this crowd that were on their hands just 8 minutes in suddenly back in it. Here's a chance for Hintz as he tries to put it on a tee for Harley. It's deflected to center. Partial break. McDavid scores! The back check from Hintz was all over him, but he was able to hang on and go back to the forehand, and Connor McDavid has given Edmonton a 2-goal lead again.
Eight 877-353-0700. Now's the time to unburden yourself of whatever's bothering you. If you have a grievance, air it. We do it every Friday. I'm going to start, James. I'm going to get this hot take out of the way. All right? This is happening in the airline industry. I have some grievances with the travel and airline industry on a fairly regular basis. This one, though, I think I might be standing alone in. I brought something similar to this up before. Turkey is now going to fine you, not the food Turkey, not the bird Turkey, but the country of Turkey is going to fine you if you're flying in on Turkish Airways, you're flying out on Turkish Airways, whatever. They're going to fine you if you unbuckle your seatbelt and you stand up before it's your turn to exit the plane. If you jump into the aisle, you get fined. A $67 ticket could potentially be issued. Now, the reason for this is because, not because of the same thing that might have influenced a decision like this in the United States. Apparently, it's really common when you're flying in India, you're flying in Turkey, whatever, that as soon as the plane is on the ground, everyone just hops up and tries to crowd toward the door. They're still taxiing. The pilots are going crazy. They're like, everybody sit back down. Flight attendants trying to get you to sit back down. Now they're going to financially punish people in order to try and stop this. But I've long held this belief, James, that you're sitting on a plane for anywhere from 1 to 15 hours. When that plane lands and that seatbelt sign goes off, I don't care where you're sitting in the plane. Go ahead, get up out of your seat. You've been in the seat for so dang long. Now, don't butt the line unless you have a short connection to make. But that is also something that we should be understanding of. If the person comes running up from the back, maybe they have a short connection. So fining people to stop this, I have a grievance with that because it takes it too far.
And now I haven't you travel, you do much more air travel than I do.
Okay.
And than I have in my life even. So maybe I'm not the best person to give my opinion on this sort of thing, but like it makes sense to me that they want to discourage if the plane hasn't stopped moving even though it's on the ground at the airport. They would want to discourage people getting up and lining up to leave already. That makes sense to me. But maybe but I'm also not agreeing, or I'm not disagreeing with you when you say, especially you mentioned like a 15-hour flight. A lot of these Turkish Airways flights are going to be that long for people.
You could take it direct from Turkey from Istanbul to Denver. You
Yeah,
know how long that flight is?
That's a long flight. So especially those really long ones, I do not disagree with your sentiment that, hey, like seatbelt signs off and I need to stretch my legs.
They're also
I guess I'm in the middle with it. I can understand why they would want to discourage the rushing to the front of the plane while the plane's still moving on the ground. But also, yeah, like you don't need to fine the people.
They're also fining people who are smoking on the plane because apparently that's still a problem.
Yeah, well, that one they should get a fine for.
I do love
Right?
I do love when you get on a plane. Usually it's for travel to or from a different country, and you get on a plane and there's like an old person that you just know it is their first time on an airplane because of how lost they appear. They're just like, "What is this?" You're like, "That's the person that's going to smoke on the airplane."
Yeah,
because they just don't know. They're like, "What do you mean? I watched commercials back in the 50s. Everyone was smoking on the airplane."
Favorite movies. My favorite movies from the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Everyone's smoking. What do you mean I can't do this?
All right, 78-89. My grievance is with the San Francisco 49ers letting go of Mitch Wishnowsky. Sheesh. I'm a Niner fan. I want to see Mitch stay. But also, I will say this. Mitch is one of the great American dream stories that we've ever had come through the University of Utah or seen in sports. He was a dude who was like he was installing Windows in his mid-20s when finally someone was like, hey, how about you try doing this punting thing? And he ended up making about $12 million in the NFL punting for the San Francisco 49ers. He went to 2 Super Bowls. Yeah, I'd like to see him extend that run forever, but Mitch is doing just fine.
Well, and another team's going to pick him up, right?
And he was kind of overpriced for the Niners.
Yeah, and that's the other part of this. It's been well documented on this show, just how much money the Niners are giving to their older star players to try to extend this Super Bowl window, and to also thank them for their years of service. So yeah, there's going to be casualties, and an obvious casualty is a position like punting when you're paying way over market value for your punter right now. We'll get a different punter who may not be as good, but is going to do a good enough job for us. We don't plan on punting much anyway. That's the other thing. Like if everything goes to plan, they're not going to have to use the punt. They hopefully won't have to use the punter that much anyway. So I can understand the line of thinking. It is unfortunate for our guy Mitch Wish.
He's healthy. He is going to get picked up by another team, and their new special teams coordinator has a relationship with the guy they're going to replace him with. Thomas Morstead became available.
Oh, okay.
So, and he said Kyle Shanahan publicly said it's just a contract thing. We love Mitch. It's a contract thing. So he'll be all right.
Maybe he can be the Chiefs punter and win a Super Bowl. I don't know. Oh, sorry.
Grievance from 1624. I get the Utes want to be on a national broadcast, but what is the 9 p.m. kickoffs? Being on a national broadcast doesn't matter if half the nation is sleeping when it's on. Guys, I don't like to be the one to have to tell you this, but you know who's watching Utah football in week 1 of the 2025 season? Utah fans.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, if you had this game in prime time, unless you want them to start their season with Georgia, Texas, USC, like a huge juggernaut of a matchup, in week 1, no one's watching Utah unless they're the only game on. This is actually better for the national audience for Utah.
It is, and listen, it's a Saturday night. Obviously, less people are watching 9 o'clock games than they are 1:30, even 5, 6 o'clock games. But it's a Saturday. These games are on Saturday. People are staying up late. So
I'm staying up real late for this one.
There's a good amount of people outside of Utah and LA markets that these two teams are from that are going to be watching these games because they like football and they don't have to work the next day, so might as well stay up late.
Pac-12 After Dark. 4611 says, grievance, construction season. My gripe is with drivers who think they're above the rules. When a lane is closed and traffic is already lined up to merge, some still speed ahead in the closing lane, passing everyone just to cut at the front.
See, this guy's
you
wrong.
You should
though.
be tased. Stay classy, folks.
So this guy's mistaken. It's called zipper merging. If you paid attention in driver's ed, you're supposed to use all of the lane until it is closed. So the guys speeding ahead are actually driving properly. You're not necessarily not driving properly by getting over sooner. You're just gonna get there in a longer time because you didn't zipper merge.
Yeah, you got it. You're absolutely right. One car, another car, one car, another car, just like the teeth of a zipper.
Yep.
75-16. My grievance this week.
Sorry to tell you that.
My grievance this week and probably for a while is the Utah Jazz for sucking at basketball. Yeah. That is all.
That's like the old go-to for Utah fans in this segment. BYU.
Yep.
My grievance is BYU. We love all those.
I have one more grievance. The Last of Us, which is a video game I did not play, but I watched the first season of.
I haven't watched it yet. It looks interesting to me. So, but are you about to tell me it's not worth it?
Season 1, I really enjoyed.
Okay.
Season 2, grievance with you. Season 2, you sucked. And the ending of season 2, the final episode of season 2, sucked even worse. First of all, 7 episodes in the season, James. Who does a season with odd-numbered episodes?
Yeah,
what?
That's weird.
7 episodes, and then the ending, you can watch it, and you'll realize what I'm talking about. Grievance with the way that they capped off season number 2, which was already bad. You needed to kind of resurrect it, rescue it with a great finale, and instead you just Grievance to HBO Max, whatever.
You ready for my grievance?
I'm ready for your grievance.
I've got some sound for this one
from
really? The Dan Patrick Show from this morning.
All right.
We spent a little time yesterday talking about who has the most pressure going into this football season, as we are now 98 days away from the start of the NFL season.
It's one closer.
I know. I'm surprised the mothership doesn't have a countdown where they just put 98 up in the corner. And then 90. Why don't we do that?
An actual clock?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Just now, I don't want to do hour. I don't want to do day, hour, any of that.
Minutes and seconds.
Yeah, I think we should. I think it should be like an actual running clock that counts down thousands of hours.
Once again, to show the power of the NFL over any other sport, is there any other sport where you could possibly even remotely consider having a countdown of 100 days or less?
I'm going to answer that. No.
No. No.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Like that was a direct shot at us, OC.
Can you imagine if you did like a 100-day countdown to the RSL season or something?
Yeah.
People just be like, "What are you doing? We only do this for football."
Yeah. But I feel
Salt Lake Bees baseball is 100 days away.
Tony Parks might be doing that. Shout out to Tony. Does a great job on the Bees broadcast. That, of course, was from the Dan Patrick Show. You heard Dan and the Danettes talking about countdown clocks and how it only works for NFL. And you can hear Dan Patrick Show, of course, 7 to 10 every weekday morning here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 792.1 FM. Shameless plug there. But, yeah, grievance. We do a countdown clock for college football, and people like it, okay, Dan Patrick? All right? It's not just NFL. All right? You laughing at the end there.
We are 210 days away from Utah Mammoth hockey.
It really does feel like it's only football, though.
What's the statute of limitations? Like if we did 120 days, is that too many?
I think 100 is the number. Maybe like you could do shorter, obviously.
I'll tell you this.
But I think 100 is the most. It feels like a nice round number. It feels like something that goes, oh my gosh, we're only 100 days away when you start it. Anything longer than that, it's like, okay, why are we counting down this early?
So we have a very, very like once in a lifetime opportunity as a family to go do a gorilla trek, and already booked the plane tickets. And you know how when you're on like you have a 278 days until I check in for the flight.
Oh yeah, the Delta app and others do that.
Has the countdown. So is that too long of a countdown, James?
I think it might be.
I'm very, very excited for this. Like this is one of the.
I mean, does that help you build the anticipation to see that, to look at that every day? Oh, only 277 today.
Oh, here we go, baby. Like that's probably a little long.
That's probably a little long. No, tongue-in-cheek grievance, of course, because they're not exactly wrong. And like. I think they're obviously thinking of nationally because they're a national radio show. Locally, something like our Utah football countdown clock, it works great for a college football market. That's why we do it. By the way, 92 days till Utah football, Utah versus UCLA, August 30th. Nationally, it probably only is an NFL thing that you can do. And maybe college football nationally, but NFL is a much bigger deal than college football is nationally.
You have another grievance?
Oh yes, my wife wanted to share one. She has a grievance with being pregnant still. she's gotten to that stage, which you warned me about.
Yes.
OC, you did a great job warning me about that. Like, there's certain things, there's certain complications that of course are going to make a pregnant woman feel down in the dumps, but also they could have no complications and they'll feel down in the dumps because it's just rough being pregnant. It's rough being 8-9 months pregnant. So that's where she is. She wanted me to share. I have a grievance against being pregnant. She's ready for the baby to come already, OC. I'm not sure I'm totally ready, but she is, and she's the one actually going through it. So I let her feel that way.
So there's all these things that you can do. Like they have one of those like electro stim belts that you can put on that makes you as a male feel labor pains or whatever.
Feel what a contraction feels like. Yeah.
And I've never done one, but it's hilarious to watch guys put them on. And the thing that you could do that, you could probably feel how nasty a contraction is. But one thing that we as men will never ever have to experience is that the pregnancy thing of just like when you go to sleep, you feel gigantic and immobile and bloated and whatever else, cranky. And then when you wake up, you feel that way. And 24 hours of your day, you feel that way.
No relief till it's over.
For months and months and months.
Yeah.
And when you're, and I mean, everyone with kids probably has experienced this. When you get to that home stretch, you're just like, you're completely worthless, James.
Yeah.
And don't take it personally, but you just are. And you're just like, can I do anything? And the response is like, what can you do?
They're like, yeah, you want to do this for me?
Yeah, it's like,
go ahead.
I can't. We can't.
Yeah.
It's not a thing.
I would lie, and I have made this joke with her. I'm like, I would lie and say, yes, I'd happily do it for you, but I would not do that for you. I'm sorry.
No, that's
that's not something I wish to do, even to fake, that it's been respect to all the mothers who have gone through that, respect to all pregnant women, those listening to the show and otherwise who are going through it right now, because that is not something obviously men are not capable of doing that, but I'm not sure if we can handle what they do, and they do it so gracefully, despite all the times when they are cranky about it, and rightfully so. They just handle it. It's amazing.
God knew what he was doing.
Absolutely.
When that's something that we're going to let the women handle.
Yes.
You men could be the hunters and the gatherers, I guess. Like that. It's James, I will say this. I'm assuming you're planning on being in the delivery room?
Yes.
Your wife, in your eyes after that, you're going to be like, wow, I'm married to a superhero. That's really fascinating.
So going back to Dan Patrick, he said that because they get a lot. If you listen to the show, you hear a lot of callers. They ask for a lot of parental advice, and Dan and the Danettes, they're all fathers, so they do a good job of doling that out. One of the things Dan said recently to a recent caller asking for that parental advice was, "You're never going to be more proud of your wife than you are when you see her in the delivery room going through labor."
Yeah.
And I said, I already feel that way just watching her go through this pregnancy, so I can't imagine feeling that much more proud of her through the labor pains, but I'm sure I will.
You will. And just so you know, like James, if you're going to try to establish any kind of dominance in the relationship, you have to do it now because once you see that, you're going to really realize, like, I am completely useless here. She needs me basically zero. So, if you want there to be a hierarchy at all and you want to at least be equals, you got to really overcompensate now, James. All right, we'll take a quick one. Thanks for airing your grievances. We'll close out the Sean O'Connell show. I don't know if Spence is on remote today, so we'll just some final thoughts next on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Final segment of the show today brought to you by Burt Brothers. Summer adventures are here. Burt Brothers is kicking off this summer season with huge savings on auto services, on deals on the major tire brands. You've got 1 day left, well, the rest of today and tomorrow, to save on Firestone tires with $120 in rebates. Visit your nearest Burt Brothers today. Drive home with a great deal. Spence Checketts in the Drive are live at Tim Dahle Nissan, 4528 South State Street in Murray. Stop by and check out their great post-Memorial Day deals. Spence will be on location from 2 to 6. Tim Dahle Nissan, 4528 South State in Murray. If you didn't catch the whole show today, or really any of the shows that you wanted to catch this week, you can go to the ESPN 700 app, check out the on-demand section. ESPN700sports.com has the sound. Make sure you're following us on all the social media platforms. ESPN 700 Sports Utah on YouTube. We're really everywhere, especially wherever you get your podcasts. Had some great conversations today. Big thanks to Nick Olczyk for joining us. That was a really, really fun one. Covered a lot of ground with him. Tony Jones, as always, is wonderful to talk to. Scott Mitchell had some great thoughts as well. I want to wrap up the show with this. The question that I asked to start things off today was whether or not you support when coaches kind of point the finger at players if the players are at fault. Just to refresh it, here's Pete DeBoer, who's the Dallas Stars head coach, talking about why he pulled their goalie, Jake Ottinger, in the first period.
You know, there's the reasoning's always to try and spark your group. So that was the number one reason. We had talked endlessly in this series about trying to play with the lead. And obviously we were in a 2-0 hole right away. And you know what, I didn't take that lightly, and I didn't blame it all on Jake. But, you know, the reality is if you go back to last year's playoffs, you know, he's lost 6 to 7 games to Edmonton, and we gave up 2 shots on 2 goals in an elimination game. So, you know, it was partly to spark our team and wake them up, and partly, you know, knowing that, you know, status quo had not been working, you know, and that's a pretty big sample size.
I don't blame it all on Jake, but here are the reasons why you could blame it on Jake. Yeah. I totally understand trying to spark your team. I definitely get that. This was fascinating to me because Pete DeBoer pulled Ottinger, who had been great in the previous 2 playoff series, not so much in this one, and he pulled him to try and spark things. Look, when you're bleeding, as the hockey guys like to say, you got to make something happen. Nick Olczyk said definitely call a timeout there, regroup a little bit. You pull Jake Ottinger, and that's fine. Let people either tell you it was a good decision, even though the results didn't work out, or tell you that it was a bad idea. You can do all of that. I think that you spoke a sentence or 2 extra if you're Pete DeBoer right there. And you could have just said, I wanted to spark things. My strategy did not work. You don't have to throw the player under the bus. And I don't know if just like speaking the facts is throwing the player under the bus, but you don't have to remind everyone how bad he's been against Edmonton because the series is now over anyway. You got to live with this guy. This is somebody that his contract ends next year, but you got to live with him presumably through this offseason and next year. You don't need to complicate your own life by saying things like that.
Yeah, I started out the show saying I didn't mind it at all, but I don't know if it's your points wearing me down or hearing a guy like Nick Olczyk say, yeah, it felt unnecessary, but I'm starting to feel more, lean more on the side of, yeah, he probably should have just said, we're trying to spark the team, and maybe even say, and Oilers have had his number this series. Maybe if that's all you're going to, like, talk about this series, right?
Yeah, or you could say the Oilers have had our number.
Yeah, our number is a better way to do it.
Here's the thing. It's the only kind of coach speak that I like. When a coach, even though we know you're lying and it's not actually your fault, head coach, that anything went bad on the field, on the ice, on the diamond, whatever. We know it's not actually your fault in most of those scenarios because you don't get to play anymore. It's most of the time not actually the coach's fault when execution goes bad. And if it's a play call, hockey doesn't have play calls the same way the football does. Not even the same way the basketball does. It doesn't have the set pieces of soccer for the most part. So hockey is very much a very much a game that belongs to the player. And your influence as a coach is incredibly limited during actual game play. So we know that it's not actually your fault and that somebody else made the mistake and somebody else gave up the goals. But part of the deal when you become a highly compensated leader of men is you take responsibility for the failures of your subordinates, whether they're your actual failures or not. We've seen it at the college level. We've seen it at the professional level. And now I like the honesty when you actually get like a little bit more insight, but you have to walk that line very, very carefully. And you don't want to say, yeah, that was actually his bad, not mine, or say anything that could be interpreted that way.
Yeah.
And I didn't even really get that vibe. I think that DeBoer just hadn't thought this out enough and said, all right, I'm just going to take the bullets because the series is over anyway. It's not like he's being like, well, he didn't work hard enough. He didn't prepare hard enough. He just reminded everyone how bad his goalie had been. And it just felt unnecessary. Like you said, James, felt like you're kind of like salting the wound a little bit. Not only did we lose it, the series is over, but a big reason for that is because this guy has been bad against them. He's lost 6 out of his last 7 against Edmonton.
A goaltender has given up a lot of goals to a team that has Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. What? Oh, you know what this reminds me of? Actually, I felt so dumb last night when the game started, and they were talking about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I mistakenly said that he's out for the season. No, Zach Hyman is the Oiler that's out for the season, had season-ending surgery. So Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, one of their other really good goal scorers and playmakers, he is healthy and expected to play in the Stanley Cup final. Zach Hyman, also a really good player, not. So I have to own up to that.
Well, I didn't
mistake that
we both got
made
that wrong
yesterday.
Yeah, we both.
But yeah, going back to what you said, like, oh, my goaltender struggled against a team that has the offensive firepower, the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah, all the other 31 teams in the NHL, however many teams there are in the league, they're all saying, "Yep, join the club." We all struggle against those guys because they're awesome.
Anyway, we've chewed up some of the Drive with Spence Checketts. We will send you into your weekend. Again, Spence is down on remote at Tim Dahle Nissan. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for everyone who joined us. We'll do it again next week. Sean O'Connell Show, Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN.